Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here. We've got yet another injury report leading up to Vikings and Eagles. A lot to discuss tonight at 6:50 here, about 35 minutes into the show if you're rewatching. Eric Sidewater, a great guest who breaks down X's and O's. He's watched a ton of Vikings film to look at how the teams are going to match up. He generally covers the Eagles, but great deep analysis there. And then later on tonight, Manny Hill, as always, picks the schedule. But let's dive into the injury report right away. JJ McCarthy, not a full participant in practice today. So that tells you there really isn't a decision for KOC to be made. I mean, earlier in the week, it sounded like Kevin O'Connell was going to be able to watch JJ McCarthy in practice, see if he could check off some boxes, and then if he could, potentially play JJ McCarthy on Sunday. But that would have required a 100% healthy ankle, at least for Thursday. This is a big practice day, as has been noted numerous times by Kevin O'Connell when JJ McCarthy missed it due to the birth of his child. So we know if he's not practicing in full on Thursday, he is certainly not going to play on Sunday. I think what the question will be that will be answered by O'Connell tomorrow is whether he will be active at all. And my guess would be probably not, that Max Brosmer will be the backup quarterback. That's just a guess. We will, again, find that out probably tomorrow. But if Brosmer's the backup, you are one slammed shoulder into the ground away from Max getting to play football in the NFL, which he's already done a little bit of in the Cincinnati game, and then one play at the end of the half in London against Cleveland. But you are that close potentially if JJ McCarthy can't be the backup with the status of his ankle. And then there's been a handful of folks who have brought up the idea, well, couldn't he start against the Chargers if Wentz doesn't play well against the Eagles? And I would say no. I mean, not with without a full week of practice this week. And next week, they'll practice one time before going out there to Los Angeles to play the LA Chargers. You're not going to be able to get ready. And it's always a truncated game plan as well when you're talking about that short week. And that's not an ideal time. Even if his ankle got to 100%, one practice, shortened or tightened up game plan, really not a good idea to start JJ McCarthy with the entire team on short rest. It looks like now that week 9 against the Detroit Lions would be the first possible time that JJ McCarthy would be able to start. So yesterday when he didn't have the full practice, it looked like, okay, I think we know where this is headed. And then today without the full practice, almost 100% guarantee that it will be Carson Wentz. In fact, our friends at FanDuel are so sure that they have props up for Carson Wentz. And let me throw the FanDuel question of the day at you before I get into the rest of the injury report, which is Carson Wentz's over-under on FanDuel, 231.5 yards against the Eagles. Jalen Hurts is at 203.5, so 231 to 203. Which quarterback needs to hit their over more in order to win this game? So do the Vikings have to lean more on Carson Wentz going over 230, or do the Eagles need a bigger game from Jalen Hurts to win the game at just 203? I would probably answer Jalen Hurts because it seems like the running game of the Eagles is not the same, and Hurts has not been the same quarterback as he was last year with the pass protection issues with getting on the same page as wide receivers. He would need, I think, a bigger day against the Vikings defense in order for them to get a win. But curious about your answers there. So back to the rest of the injury report, a little bit of a surprise name popping up on the report, which was Jonathan Grenard. He was not listed at all on Wednesday, full participant, and then on Thursday popped up with a limited participation due to a hamstring. So that is something to watch for this game. Now, Grenard was still around. He was still in the locker room and didn't seem like, he was, I don't know, just as usual, Jonathan Grenard. So maybe it was just the smallest thing and taking it precautionary. He didn't miss practice. It was just a limitation, but we'll see about his status tomorrow, whether he is a full participant or if there is some sort of designation if he's questionable. And I think that it goes without saying that they need Jonathan Grenard really, really badly in the lineup. Andrew Van Ginkel was limited for the second day in a row. That doesn't give you a ton of confidence that he's going to be good to come back and play in this game. Another one that's up in the air and could have an impact on Vikings and Eagles. But if they were to miss Grenard and Van Ginkel and it's Dallas Turner and some combination of Gabe Murphy and Bo Richter, that's not what you're looking for against some really good offensive tackles for the Philadelphia Eagles. You need Grenard putting pressure on Jalen Hurts. You need him at 100% to be able to do that. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on for tomorrow for sure. So that popping up on the injury report was kind of indicative of what kind of season it's been. Like nothing necessarily happens other than one day of practice, and then your superstar franchise defensive player ends up on the injury report. But I think it also speaks to they need Van Ginkel back, and they don't have depth there. And we were talking last night a little bit about, well, could they consider making any trades? Is there another player that would add to the mix that they could go out and look for? And I threw out there outside linebacker, that a pass rusher, considering that Dallas Turner has taken on a great load so far, that Jonathan Grenard has to play basically every single play, and Van Ginkel's been banged up, that if they win this game, even if they're just a little above 500 going, if they go 1-1 going into that mini bye week where the trade deadline will be coming up, that might be something to look for. And I know that giving away draft capital is not something anybody wants to do right now when you are taking, just considering the quarterback situation, a little bit more of a longer view. But this is still a team that has the potential to win a good amount of games and be in the playoffs and all those things ahead of them. So if you weren't talking about a major deal, so think about even when they got Cam Robinson, we don't know what the comp pick is going to be for Cam Robinson. That depends, I think, on how much he plays. I can't remember the rules on that one, but they didn't trade that much for Cam Robinson. If he ends up playing for somebody else, then you're doing fine in the comp pick area and you can get that back. So you basically trade nothing. And you might be able to do that for an edge rusher if you were to trade for somebody that was pretty much guaranteed to get a contract with someone else the next year. You can get a comp pick back for that and not lose really anything, except for you'll just have to get it back a year later. So that might be something to consider. This might be scaring them into considering that, with Grenard even missing half of practice today with limitations. Brian O'Neill also limited, not seeming like that would mean a great chance to come back with no full practices for him. So maybe Justin School will be starting there. Wouldn't mind seeing Walter Rouse. We talked about that last night, that really have liked the progress of Walter Rouse and the way that he's played in a couple games, but just seems like they trust the veteran a little bit more if O'Neill is not good to go. But the good news on the injury report was that Donovan Jackson had a full practice, which would point much more toward the realistic possibility of Donovan Jackson coming back, and they need him. I mean, this is a game where you're facing some very serious defensive tackles, and going into it with Joe Huber in there would not very much be ideal, as opposed to the first rounder who's had a very good start to his career. And then you can have Brandel at center. And when you think about that line, okay, it's not quite there yet. Maybe on Thursday you could get Brian O'Neill back, and suddenly it starts to look like the offensive line that the Minnesota Vikings put together, and it's possible it could get healthy and start, being itself again. But Blake Brandel, I think, is very likely to be the center. So if it's Christian Darrisaw, who Kevin O'Connell said yesterday is not going to be on a pitch count anymore, Darrisaw did sit for rest today, but they've told us that Darrisaw is going to sit for rest pretty much once a week for the rest of the season. So if he's not on a pitch count and he's going to play the entire game, and Jackson is back, Brandel's an improvement at center, and Will Fries, then you really, because I think Brandel played like a starting level center, maybe not a superstar, but a starting level center, then it feels more like 4 out of 5. It's not Ryan Kelly. Ryan Kelly was in his prime a superstar, was still playing really well. but you don't feel like the drop off is the same as it was from Kelly to Michael Juergens, who is still a developing young player. It's now a veteran who is in there with a lot of experience. Closer, not quite there yet with the offensive line. So there's kind of your rundown of today's injury report. On the other side, Jalen Carter was limited after being a full participant on Wednesday. It seems like that heel of his is not up to 100%, and Landon Dickerson limited both days. Those are two to watch as well, because Dickerson is such a key player for them. And Jalen Carter is one of the best in the league, but he has not been the same from what I've seen looking back at these last two games. Well, he didn't play against the Giants. So I guess, when was the last time he played? Was it against the Broncos? Looking back, let's see. Let me make sure I've got that right. But Carter has just not been the same since he's been going through that injury. Just not the same level. Yeah, it was Denver. The last time we saw him play. He had 4 pressures in that game, but had a 49 PFF grade. And that's just not Jalen Carter. From a week-to-week basis, he's usually one of the best players in the league. But that heel must be impacting him to at least some extent. And then him not fully participating could matter to Vikings and Eagles, and maybe take a little pressure off of Brandel playing center for the second time ever, and Donovan Jackson potentially coming back here. But a very good sign for Jackson coming back. So let me get you that FanDuel question of the day one more time. And then I got something else that I want to discuss after reading the comment section from yesterday. The FanDuel question of the day, again, Carson Wentz, over-under is 231.5 on FanDuel. Jalen Hurts is 203.5 for total yards. Which one of those guys needs to hit the over more in order for their team to win? Because I think that both teams are having a bit of the same discussion. The Eagles are looking to run against a run defense that has some weaknesses. The Vikings don't want to lean too much on the arm of Carson Wentz. They want to be able to run against the Eagles, get to the outside. Denver was able to do that even late in the game against them. Certainly Cam Scatabo was able to do that. So they've given up some ground game. I think the Vikings want to establish that early and lean on Jordan Mason here and maybe a bit of Xavier Scott as well and get going there and then run everything off of that. But at the same time, the Vikings have played from behind too much this year, might need the big arm of Carson Wentz. So which quarterback is going to need that more is the question. I'll get to your answers in a sec, but I wanted to talk about something that I noticed yesterday based on some of my comments about Carson Wentz, JJ McCarthy, that kind of lit up the comment section after last night's show. So one of the things I said was there were a handful of commenters last night who declared that they were out on this team until JJ McCarthy started. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit because, I mean, I tend to think of Vikings fans is impossible to kill. I mean, just no matter how many flesh wounds Vikings fans have taken over the years, they keep coming back no matter what. And I don't think there's any such thing as a bandwagoning Minnesota Viking fan. Not that people haven't hopped on for different star players through the years, whether it was Randy Moss or Adrian Peterson. I hear from people sometimes who are like, yeah, I'm from New Jersey or Seattle, but I loved Moss, so I decided to be a Viking fan, or going way back, Tarkenton or whatever, right? So you jump on at some point, I'm sure. But usually you have plenty of opportunities to jump off, whether it's Favre or it's Gary Anderson or it's Keenum's meltdown against the Eagles, or, you know, many opportunities to say, this team's cursed. See ya. Jumping off that bandwagon. I'm going to go cheer for the Chiefs. And Vikings fans don't do that. The very, very loyal bunch. Every single year, you guys get jacked up for the season. You get your hopes very high, and many times the way that it ends is not the way that you would have drawn it up, right? So I feel like it's in the DNA of Vikings fans to keep fighting the fight week after week and year after year, regardless. But I do observe that in recent years, there has been a little bit more, I think, in terms of desperation. Look, getting to a Super Bowl is so hard, but to have stability at the quarterback position and going through that Kirk era where he was the promised veteran quarterback who could manage the game, and all they had to do is have him play a little bit better than Case Keenum, and they could win the Super Bowl. And then it got put all on Kirk Cousins, where he had to pick up a failing defense through the years. That didn't really work. They couldn't really rebuild around him. Believe it or not, the previous regime didn't draft all that well on defense either. It wasn't just the 2022 draft. It was a lot of misses in the years before that. And so then you get to a point where everybody kind of looks around and goes, there's only one way out of this. And that way out is by drafting a quarterback and finding that franchise guy who is in Buffalo, who is in Baltimore, who is in, maybe Houston or a number of other cities that we're going to see in Los Angeles, the Justin Herbert, that franchise type quarterback where you can have many shots at winning a Super Bowl. I think about, you hear me talk all the time about Jared Goff and how good I think Jared Goff is. And I'll watch analysis that praises a lot of different QBs, and I barely ever see Jared Goff, but man, in Detroit, they love Jared Goff. They know that he is a great quarterback who year after year is going to give them a chance to go compete for a Super Bowl. And you can nitpick this, that, or the other thing about his game, or Herbert, or Lamar in the playoffs, or Stroud, who hasn't been perfect the last couple of years. But what those franchises know is that you start with a certain baseline of quarterback talent that you can build around, and that's what you've been looking for. And if you're the Giants and you draft Eli Manning and you get 10 shots at it over a career, maybe it clicks. Or if you draft a Phil Rivers, it didn't quite ever click for him to win the Super Bowl, but man, they were good, year after year. Every season, their fans thought, well, as long as we've got Rivers, if we do the rest of the things right, then you've got a chance to really legitimately compete for a Super Bowl. Drew Brees eventually made it happen. And that's what Vikings fans have been lacking. It's chaos at the quarterback position. It's instability, and it's never feeling settled there to the point where we can talk about, hey, how are they going to rebuild the left guard? I know since we discuss everything, we get there. But the roster, the coaching decisions, everything else that gets put under a microscope, and it doesn't always have to be what's next at quarterback. I don't think there's ever been a time where I've covered this team that what's next at quarterback hasn't been at the center of the discussion. I got here the day that Teddy Bridgewater got hurt, and then it was trading for Sam Bradford. Then Bradford looks great in camp and in week 1, and he goes down, and then it's Keenum. And then Keenum had his fans that wanted him to be their quarterback long-term. They go with Kirk. But every year it seemed like it was really 2018 to 19 was the only time where it was totally locked in. Hey, Kirk is your quarterback next year. You're set. And then the rest of the time it was, well, is Kirk going to sign an extension? From 2019 to 2020, that wasn't a sure thing, whether he was going to sign an extension. And some folks may have advocated for drafting Jalen Hurts to the Vikings, but instead he's an Eagle. But they signed an extension with him. But then after 2021, it was unclear whether the Vikings were going to trade him when Kevin O'Connell got here and draft somebody else. It just happened to be a very bad draft, but I think they would have done it if it was a good draft. The following season, there were reports that they wanted to draft Richardson or Bryce Young, but they couldn't trade up high enough because they won too many games in 2022. They don't sign Kirk to an extension. He's asking for too much money. And then, off we go into 2023. He gets injured. We all know the 24 draft class is great. And here we are, right? So the minute that McCarthy is drafted, I remember myself sitting in this seat during that draft and saying, clean slate for JJ McCarthy, like forget everything from before, off we go into the future. This is the guy that they've been looking for. This was what they built the timeline around. This is the person that they have set up the entire franchise to support, from the coach to drafting Jordan Addison to trading for TJ Hawkinson. It's all based on this quarterback who was eventually going to get here. And at some point, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah said, we really had this in mind for a while. Like, we knew 2024 was going to be a special draft class. We had our eyes on it for a long time. He kind of let the cat out of the bag there, that the plan was never to stick with Kirk Cousins past the 2023 season. So for all of you who have been following in this show, and we've tracked every single step along the way and followed, my work going back to even 1500 ESPN, I think there is not just a year of buildup, there is a many years of buildup to this situation. So I can understand and greatly empathize with finally having it arrive, then being told, no, you've got to wait another year for it. You see Sam Darnold play the way that he did. I think a lot of folks did not appreciate how fun that season was last year, because they were thinking, don't play too good, Sam Darnold. We need JJ McCarthy to be here next year. And it's one of those, maybe you don't know what you got till it's gone type of situations with not just Sam Darnold, but that season. That's where it's, hey, that Seattle game, that Falcons game, like, don't worry about the future. Like, enjoy that game while it's happening. And one of the reasons that we talk like that is because you never know what the future is going to hold. So you get here, and there is a lot of signal in the decision where if you turn down Darnold, you turn down Aaron Rodgers, you don't do enough to sign Daniel Jones, what that tells us is, wow, this team really believes in JJ McCarthy. And I've gotten a few times, oh, you sold us on how good McCarthy was in camp. I can only tell you what I saw. And what I saw was he looked pretty darn good in camp after a rocky beginning to training camp. I don't believe that I've ever said I could guarantee what's going to happen once the real games start, but he clearly looked good enough in training camp and in mini camp and all those things to not get any sort of competition for him in the offseason, and only at the very end bring in Carson Wentz, who was, again, not competing with him to start in any way, was barely learning the offense when he was asked to come in and play against the Cincinnati Bengals. So then you get the first game, and that is one of the most fun weeks that we have had here after that Chicago win. And yeah, he looked pretty bad in the first quarter too, into the third quarter, but the comeback, the locker room in Chicago, it was all very special. And I remember having the thought of, like, this actually happened. Like, this thing that I've been talking about forever, it actually happened. They won a game with the rookie quarterback contract who they picked in the top 10. And look at all the patience paid off for all of you to watch JJ McCarthy play that way. And then, as so often happens to Vikings fans, the football was pulled out from Charlie Brown. And not only does he have a really tough game, which I don't think that any of us should put too much weight on overall in the bigger analysis of JJ McCarthy. I've said that many times. Just because it didn't go well doesn't mean his career's over or he'll never be good again. But it was enough to certainly scare the head coach about the way that he had handled it technically. But, this happens with quarterbacks. They have bad games. I can name 1,000 of them from guys who became really good ultimately in their career who had bad second games, including Dante Culpepper, by the way. I think he threw 3 picks in his second game. Matt Ryan had a terrible second. I started looking these up, like, hey, how did everybody play in their first 3 games? Not everyone played awesome. So you have that happen, the ankle injury, and now, okay, all right, he's hurt, but he'll be back after the bye week. And he's not. And he's not even fully practicing. And so, I mean, that is Charlie Brown in the football. That is wind out of the sails. That's very deflating. And I've definitely sensed that with Vikings fans, how deflating it is. I'm sure for the organization, it's very deflating after leaving Chicago on such a high and feeling like, wow, this team is going to be able to overcome some stuff and battle. And McCarthy is never going to be too shaken by the atmosphere and all those things. And, he showed off the arm talent, the mobility, running for a touchdown, like all those things, and how quick this league can change. And I know that is extremely disappointing because now you don't even know when he's going to play, when he's going to be back, and when this team is going to be back on track. So my point is, I get all of it. I have these conversations with you guys. I love them every night. Having discussions with Vikings fans, it's a different perspective from mine. So I really like that. But I also think that it's a very long season and the NFL is incredibly unpredictable. And I think that sometimes we could get too caught up in like we think we know what's going to happen into the future. And some folks left messages of like, well, here's why they're screwed if he doesn't play right away. And here's why you can't be patient and this and this and this and this and this. And to me, it's like, well, look, if we really did have the crystal ball and we could look forward and say, well, if they don't win in 2025, I mean, the team's going to fall apart and they're never going to make it. I don't think that that's the case. I think they have a lot of foundational players and they have a baseline level of coaching and they have a franchise that repeatedly has shown that free agent players want to be here. They have a ownership that will spend to adjust the cap in any way that they need to adjust the cap. The NFL has proven that it would sell games to Purple Insider if I paid them enough money. So they would put it on, anywhere for more money. So that salary cap is going to continue to go up. There are some ascending younger players on this team, including the left guard, Donovan Jackson. So I don't look at it like, hey, if JJ McCarthy doesn't come back this week, that this franchise is dust and they're never going to get there and you should just burn your jersey. Like that seems to me to be like a major overreaction. The way that I think you should look at it is probably that Carson Wentz gives them a chance to win games and keep the season alive. And then we all see what happens. I don't think any of us can actually look any more than 2 games down the road here for what's going to happen next with this team. And we don't know whether they'll win or lose against Philly or against the Los Angeles Chargers. But what we can say is Carson Wentz is going to be starting those games until JJ McCarthy is healthy. After that, we really have no idea. And let me tell you how crazy the National Football League is. Just when it comes to trying to be predictable. The Carolina Panthers, who are a 500 team and look like they're kind of on the rise right now, I don't know, maybe they'll lose to the Jets and that won't be the case. They were receiving phone calls and probably seriously considering trading Bryce Young last year because it had gone so badly. And they decide not to do it. And I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, but they look like a competitive NFL team with a quarterback who's making some plays and getting some game-winning drives and at very least is exciting for Carolina Panthers fans after their podcasters quit. If you saw that story after they lost to New England, one of their podcasts just shut down. I can promise that won't happen after any loss with the Vikings to Purple Insider. But the point just being that they were probably close. I mean, they're taking phone calls. It was reported by ESPN that they were taking phone calls on Bryce Young and decided not to do it. How about this? The Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming off a Super Bowl championship with Jalen Hurts, they were calling about Russell Wilson when he was with the Seattle Seahawks. This is how little anybody knows about quarterback play, is that the brilliant, genius, wonderful, incredible, magical Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a great front office, no doubt about it, they were reportedly trying to trade for Russell Wilson when Denver did it. And they had Jalen Hurts already in the building. They won the Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts. The San Francisco 49ers were attempting to convince Tom Brady to come play rather than Brock Purdy. Brady said, no, I'm going to go play flag football and wherever and be a broadcaster and own a team and be an investor in a WNBA team and keep busy that way. That's what he decided to do. And Brock Purdy took them to the Super Bowl. And we think we know. How about Brock Purdy's first year? He was this close to taking them to the Super Bowl. He was on the bench. He was Max Brosmer. And Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt after Trey Lance was either bad or got hurt. I forget which one. It was probably both. And then he goes 5-0 and goes in the playoffs and wins. And if he doesn't hurt his arm, he probably beats Philly and probably goes to the Super Bowl and they might have won. because Kansas City was flawed. I mean, we have no idea where this thing's going to go. So my point is, if you are a Vikings fan and you have come this far and you've gone all through this stuff that they've had happen to them year after year after year after year, I just don't really believe that you're going to be like, no, I'm not watching Carson Wentz. For all we know, Carson Wentz could be the guy. Who knows, right? Or JJ McCarthy could be back very soon, and it could be exactly what you wanted. But that is just to clarify the whole thing, because I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that you're going to stop watching or that you're really bailing on this team till JJ McCarthy comes back. I also think none of us really know where this thing's going to go. All I know is that they have a very good football team and that the NFC is open and that JJ McCarthy's career is not over if he needs to develop more. That's what I know. Do I know how it's going to go past 2 weeks? Absolutely not. So, that's the whole thing. And that's more than I had planned on saying, actually, but because in a couple of minutes, I want to get to my interview for tonight. But that's the whole story that was on my mind a lot yesterday after reading the comments there. So Justin says, is it me or do some fans carry their anger or disappointment of past seasons into the present? Why do that? The point of sports is a fun distraction to indulge yourself in a sports fix. Deep breaths. I think that many fan bases probably do this, but I don't know if any do it more than the Vikings, carrying not just last year's disappointment in the playoffs. It's this entire fun bag of disappointment that they carry on their backs going into every single season. And when the first loss happens, it's like, oh, not winning the Super Bowl again this year. And that has been a bit of a drag through the years, I think, for me, because I think, gosh, like Die Hard, is that, or is it, like you said, every single thing that comes up is like, why me, that sort of thing. And I get it. It's part of the identity of Vikings fandom. I wrote about this when I interviewed the writer of the How I Met Your Mother episode, where the guy is in a Vikings bar, talking about the Gary Anderson kick and all that. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but that writer is a lifelong Vikings fan, no surprise. And he was talking about it in the same way that a lot of you talk about. I'm not saying lose your identity. Like you wear that. I mean, you guys know I grew up in Buffalo. They wear it too. And there's a pride about continuing to come back year after year and believe in your team, even though you've been let down many times. So I assume that that's really there. And these are frustration comments that are being taken out at times on old podcaster me. But I think that it's probably frustration of this is what you were promised, a present under the tree. And so far it's been a lump of coal, but you got to peek at it and it's actually great underneath there against Chicago. But it's just been a lump of coal so far for now a year and how many ever weeks. That disappointment is not lost on me. So I didn't mean to downplay that disappointment. My thought is just there's so far to go. The kid is 22 years old. And I look at it as, where were so many other quarterbacks at 22 years old who succeeded? Not too many we can say were amazing. A lot of them were hitting bumps in the road. A lot of them were on the bench watching. And we can go through all the examples again, but I think we know them by heart by now, all the quarterbacks who have done that. So the one other thing that was talked about a lot was just that about, McCarthy developing on the bench and does he have to play? My big thing here is, A, you can absolutely develop on the bench. But B is if you go out there and it's too soon, that can have very serious ramifications. And I've got a bunch of examples for that as well. How about Sam Darnold? Do you think he should have played with the 2018 New York Jets? Remember seeing him against the Vikings? How bad that team was? How bad that offensive coordinator was? How bad those weapons were? And so Sam Darnold's out there. He's trying to face, this is what's so unfair to Sam Darnold. He's trying to face Belichick's defense, peak Belichick, and he's struggling. And he says he's seeing ghosts, which never should have made it to TV, by the way. And that sticks with him for the rest of his damn career. He gets made fun of nonstop every time he has a bad game. Seeing ghosts, seeing ghosts. And it's like, you think this kid should actually be playing right now? And don't you think that Josh McCown should have played the whole season? Don't you think that somebody else, probably a veteran quarterback, but no. If you draft him, you got to play him right away. Just get your coach fired, and then the coach gets fired, and the cycle goes over and over and over again, and he shows up with the Vikings and the Seahawks many years later as a good quarterback. Do you think the KOC wants that? Do you think that you want that? Probably not. So, and I've made many comparisons to different sports, but how about this? If you are a golfer and you're practicing on the range and you can't get it, and you're driving it way off to the side, you're hitting the cart over here that's out picking up the golf balls, you're duffing it over the top, you ready to play a tournament on Sunday? I don't think so. You got to have your technical stuff on the range down before you can go play on the big course against people, right? You got to have your practice rounds down. Let him get his practice rounds down first, and then he will be ready to play. I have no doubt that day will come. I just don't know when. So the best I can do for you is we're all just going to have to wait and see. But when you talk about the essence of watching sports, I think of it as the unpredictability is the reason we watch. The world is so predictable on entertainment, right? Reality TV, pretty predictable, network dramas and stuff like that. I've rarely been shocked. But sports, that's what does it for me. You turn on the TV, you never know what's going to happen. So I think about, we don't know where this is going to go, and there's plenty of chances that it goes in a good direction. It might just take longer than you thought. But I will not back off that point that he does not, the only development path is not playing him. That is not the only development path, is throwing him to the Wolves. That it isn't. There's way too much history behind quarterbacks who have stayed in practice and gotten their fundamentals down before going back out there. Way too much history on that for me to believe that. So anyway, well, I'm going to play you this interview because it's really good. And timing wise, I kind of have to keep it to the right timing here because Manny Hill's going to come up at 7:30. This is a little bit of a longer interview, but it's really good with Eagles Eric, who does a great Eagles podcast, but watch a ton of Vikings film. It's super insightful. So I got to get to that so we can get Manny in here on time and we can all watch Thursday Night Football and all that. But I'm going to continue to read and chat with you guys in the comments about what I've been talking about because I think it's an interesting subject of how the history of this team does shape people's viewpoints. And a reminder about that FanDuel question of the day, which is Carson Wentz's over-under 231.5 yards on FanDuel. And Jalen Hurts only 203.5. Which quarterback needs to hit the over more to win? So, all right, let's get to that interview. This is much more super hardcore breakdown, Vikings and Eagles. So off we go. All right, we welcome to the show for the first time ever, Eric Sidewater, goes by Eagles Eric on the Eagles Edge. That's a lot of alliteration. The Eagles Edge podcast. Eric, I'm very excited about this football game. I know that I'm sure as someone who follows the Eagles for a long time, a Carson Wentz revenge game is probably on your mind. I follow you on Twitter. You're a great follow. You've been breaking down a lot of the analytics of this game, the Vikings offense and defense. So let's dive deep into this from an Eagles perspective. I just want to start. I mean, first of all, welcome to the show. Great to have you on, man.
Thanks a lot. I'm excited to talk about this game. And I have a confession. So before some games, I'll go onto the opposing team's Reddit page and I'll say, like, here's the state of the Eagles. What's going on with your team? And I will say the Vikings fans were not receptive to this at all. I got a lot of hate messages. But I understand there's definitely some rivalry aspect there. Some old wounds. If you can remember, I can remember some big games with Kirk Cousins. So yeah, excited to get into this.
Well, I think the Eagles elevated themselves to a top Vikings hated team after 2017 because it wasn't just that the Eagles won the game and blew them out with Nick Foles, but the way that the Eagles fans acted toward Vikings fans who visited. Now, some of us who grew up in the East tried to warn people. I was on the radio that week and I said, if you're going to Philadelphia, do not wear your purple, do not wear your horns. You might not have a good time if you do. And folks did not listen, and they got beers thrown at them and very vile things said to them. But the Eagles crowd, I will say, is like none other in the NFL. They are the only team, I think, that if the first sequence is a 3-and-out, they will boo their offense, their own offense. There's no other place that does that. Also, the best in the NFL at old school jerseys. You'll see Brian Westbrook. You'll see Jerome Brown. You'll see tons of Randall Cunningham. It's a unique atmosphere, but I think that Vikings fans are still salty because of that. So, but let's say there has been actually a lot of good battles between the Vikings and the Eagles over the last number of years since that happened. 2018 and 2019, the Vikings won. There was that crazy game where Justin Jefferson fumbled the ball out of the back of the end zone in 2023 at the beginning of the season. But what I've noticed, Eric, is that the Eagles' offense at this moment doesn't quite look like some of those other offenses from the past. So I really want to start there with you. Saquon Barkley is when you get the schedule release and you start going through, you're like, oh, you're going to have to face Saquon Barkley in this game. And yet this year, so far, it has not been anything like last year. Like, take me inside what is going on with the Eagles' run game.
Yeah, and if you study, I remember there was a college kid who reached out to me this offseason saying, I've done this deep dive on every 2,000-yard rusher and what they do in their follow-up season, and statistical profiles, injuries, the whole 9 yards. And one of the oddities is that almost all of them went right down to exactly like 4.2 yards per carry. And obviously, these are just statistical anomalies, but a vast majority of them got injured. Their production obviously went way down. And there was even discussions about Saquon going out to previous 2,000-yard rushers like Derrick Henry. I believe he also talked to like Adrian Peterson at times, saying, what should I be aware of? What can I do going into the season? And by all counts, I think Saquon has been pretty much the same. He's seeing a little bit of the ghosts of the past where, if you remember when he was with the Giants, he would get constantly hit behind the line of scrimmage, maybe over 40% of the time in his last year there. And if you just juxtapose that against what the Eagles did prior to when he arrived, DeAndre Swift wasn't getting contacted till he was like 2 yards down the field. So if you extrapolated what Saquon was doing when he was actually crossed the line of scrimmage with the Giants to where he was likely to be first contact with the Eagles, you could easily envision he's going to have a huge year as long as he doesn't get injured. And he did. Now, coming into this year, this is the facts. When he doesn't have a crease, he's not that great. His vision, I would say, comes and goes. As much as his jump cut is explosive, I wouldn't necessarily call him a shifty back. And so there are times where he's trying to make a lot and there's not much to do there. But there's bigger problems than him, which is the offensive line combined with the scheme. So there's been lots of talks about how predictable the Eagles are. Early on in the season, it was condensed formations, 12 and 13 personnel, bringing a bunch of tight ends, many of which cannot block, like Grant Calcaterra and Kylan Granson. And then you're running inside zone, essentially, over and over again, 1 yard in a cloud of dust. Now, last year, they ran like 12+% more gap scheme. It was highly effective for them last year. They ran more play action last year, marrying the run and pass game, and they've seemed to get away from that. Now, getting in the offensive line, Landon Dickerson has been a shell of himself. Last year, I hand charted every 10-yard run that Saquon had in 2024, and Landon Dickerson had the key block or was one of the key blocks in the highest percentage of those runs. he's now potentially a below average guard with his injuries. So you're going from an all pro to a replacement level player there. Cam Jurgens, as much as he's great getting out on the move and gap scheme type stuff, he's getting blown up by nose tackles and big three techs. And then when you're like, if you're running under center and your center is 5 yards in the backfield, you can't get anything going. Tyler Steen, he's not nearly the mauler that Mekhi Becton was. So between those two elements, you're just seeing a unimaginative run game where there's one guy or two guys missing key blocks over and over again. And what you have is actually one of the worst rushing attacks in the NFL if you take away quarterback scrambles.
I mean, that's a terrific breakdown, and it's all things put together here when it comes to a running back and their success. And we've seen that so many times where, yes, the running back's talent has a lot to do with whether they succeed or not, but there's also all these other factors, including, I think, actually, even the passing game can impact the running game as well. If the opposing, because we always talk about it, marrying the run with the pass as if you need to run first and then work off of that, which I get because you're trying to make them look exactly the same. But I also think that if you are getting downfield success passing the ball, that teams have to play their safeties back and they can't be quite aggressive with their linebackers if they're getting roasted on play action. And those two things start to build off each other. And the passing game has been very disjointed. So you have an offensive line that is not getting the same push. You have a passing game that seems to be one of the least consistent in the NFL, of more of kind of boom or bust. And then also when someone runs for 2,000 yards, guess what the game plan is before? Not that people didn't know about Saquon Barkley, but it's all lasers are set at stopping Saquon Barkley. Now, how do you think this matches up, though, with a Vikings defense that has struggled against the run? Because my take, so I've kind of torn it down with what's happening against the run for the Vikings. My take has been they're really, really, really missing Blake Cashman. And this is where all the stuff we talk about, sometimes it's just, hey, the better players are not playing, and then this is a different ball game. I think they're missing him. They're missing Van Ginkel, and they're probably missing Harrison Smith, who has played less than 100 snaps so far. But they don't have the big, giant dudes up front at defensive tackle. So what do you make of the matchup of two teams that really want to improve in this area?
Yeah, this may be a bad read, but when I watch the Vikings run defense, I feel like it's kind of a compounding, it's a domino effect where they know they're a little bit soft in the belly there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the back seven, they really want to converge, especially when the initial like rush path or the blockers are coming into the middle of the field and they're like, oh wait, Hargrave might get blown back. Let me come in there. And then they bounce it outside and there's no one. So obviously if you have, better anchors in the middle, that potentially solves itself. Before Blake Cashman was signed by the Vikings, and I was doing some film study for linebackers in that offseason, because if you remember, before the Eagles had Zach Bond, they had no one.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy is a beast. I absolutely loved his film. I agree with you. I think he would definitely help, especially because, he's the type of guy where if the run does get spilled, well, he can easily get sideline to sideline. He's a good tackler. That definitely would help them. I think another aspect, like in terms of how it interfaces with the Eagles, is I also view the Vikings run defense as kind of binary, where if they sell out, I think they're good. Like you can just see, they come in like hornets, and especially in like obvious run situations, and they'll make tackles for loss on like key short yardage stuff. But then it could be like a 1st and 10 and their guys are rushing upfield, and then boom, the guy's like out rushing for 15 yards or something. So in that sense, like, remember, one of the criticisms about the Eagles has been the predictability. Oh, they get in pistol. Oh, they bring in this formation, Calcaterra in a flex tight end, and it's 1st and 10. Everyone knows what's coming. And it's defenses that are less instinctive than the Vikings, defenses like the Giants, where they're triggering downhill. You could have one of the great offensive lines of the Cowboys from the 90s, but if the entire defense can trigger downhill instantly, you're not going to be successful. So if the Eagles get in some of these obvious run situations, bring in their heavy package, bring in their vanilla alignments where everyone knows it's going to be a run, I think the Vikings will do well to stop them. Um, but they talked about in their interviews, like they had a team meeting where they talked about the run game, and you could see Saquon's beaming. So maybe they're going to try to get into more outside perimeter stuff. Maybe they're going to try to get into more gap scheme stuff. It remains to be seen. One question I'd have for you is, what is the likelihood Blake Cashman plays in this game?
I think it's very high. Yep, I think it is very high. His window opened for return. There was one report from CBS Sports that he was likely to come back. I thought that's a little premature since he needs to practice, but just the way that he was talking when we spoke to him the other day, it seemed like, and the way the coaches were talking, because usually if a guy is not likely to play, it's kind of like, well, we're working him back in, and there was some smiles on faces of Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell. So I mean, that's just sort of trying to read the room a little bit. But I also think that they desperately need him back in this game, and they know that. But to your point, I think there was a great example on a big Quinshon Judkins run where they were having Dallas Turner on the outside linebacker just spike right into the middle, and he goes to the outside. He's got a one-on-one with Theo Jackson. That is a huge physical mismatch, ends up with a 14, 15-yard carry. I think that the Eagles, if you can get it out, if you can bounce to the edge, there's a lot of opportunities there if Andrew Van Ginkel isn't playing. We don't know about his status yet. That I don't know, but he's one of the better run defenders in the league, can play inside or outside linebacker. I wouldn't say that for Dallas Turner yet in his career, that he's been one of the better run defenders. I think he's coming along and he's made some tackles, but he can also be taken out of a play, not the best edge setter. So I think there will be opportunities for the Eagles to do some of that stuff and get a little bit more creative. But if they're not passing the football, the Vikings will be perfectly fine with just keep handing off, because they've been okay with that in other games. And you see what the result is from the EPA. That they're one of the best defenses in the NFL and expected points added a lot of times, because running the football, even if you're succeeding, isn't as efficient as throwing it. So what is the deal with the inconsistency of this passing game? Because it seems like for the last, I don't know, 2 years, AJ Brown has been unhappy. I actually think in that Eagles Vikings game in Philly in 2023, where they just steamrolled with DeAndre Swift all night, there was still like a mini meltdown on the sideline with AJ Brown. Is this just who AJ Brown is? I don't think it is, right? Because the number of sacks is pretty shocking for Jalen Hurts. And I mean, I imagine this must be frustrating for Brown to not get the same consistency of targets that a lot of other top wide receivers do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the discussions are reductionist. They'll say it's definitely Hurts. It's definitely Kevin Patullo. The receivers are not running their routes. The pass protection is bad. None of this is, it's not one thing. It's a combination of everything. Um, and I think, if you really want to look at an origin point of blame, you can look at Nick Sirianni, because it's been his offensive system the whole way through. When he had experienced play callers, they had success. When they brought in rookies, they failed. And I don't think the head coach has the answers to fix their offensive problems. I don't think he's the offensive guru by any stretch of the imagination. So, it's when they came out in the initial part of the season, they're running their little China concept with the in the corner over and over again. The wrap in where they have the hook and then the deep in behind it. The same stuff they ran over and over and over again. Mesh if they think they're getting man coverage. Like their playbook, their passing menu last year was not large, but they executed really well because teams kind of had to put a lot of resources to stop Saquon. And so it made it, a lot of space on the outside for those ball winners to win, made reads easier for Hurts. But when you're the champs, then teams start to study and target you, and they go, oh, well, we can just play too high. We'll still, have 7 in the box and have a safety ready to spin down if we need to. And then we can flood those 2x2 concepts. suddenly the safeties are driving on the corner route and the in. They're completely gone. So the Eagles, after 4 weeks, they pretty much shelved those concepts and they started to put in new stuff, but the timing and rhythm is not there because they would just work the same concepts over and over again last year. And we saw a potential 90-yard touchdown. I was there live at MetLife. They missed that. To me, like, it was a little detail thing where if you watch the week before, they hit a big play against the Broncos, and Devontae Smith was about 4 yards wide of the numbers, same exact kind of route. But he was 2 yards wide of the numbers against the Giants, and then the ball drifts outside, and people say Hurts completely overthrew it, but it was more of like a miscue. AJ Brown wide open on a double move against the Broncos against Hufanga, stops his route because he doesn't expect the ball, would have been a touchdown. And in the NFL, you can't just forego 70, 80-yard touchdowns. In fact, if you remember last year, the Eagles, a lot of their explosive plays were on the ground. Well, that's gone. So if you don't have the ground game moving the chains, and you don't have the explosive pass plays, what do you have? Really, and now teams have started to key in on the quarterback scramble more.
Mhm.
The Broncos did a great job stopping it. The Giants, what they did is they said if Hurts is going to beat us, it's going to be when he throws it off the scramble, because a lot of times when he goes to scramble, he'll just become a running back. He doesn't even look up. There's 3 reps against the Broncos where if he simply did this, he could have tossed a touchdown. So you could see that they worked on it, because in the Giants game he had like 4 scrambles where he hit guys on the run, but the quarterback game was nowhere to be found. And trying to put this all into one puzzle piece, it's they go into a game and they swing towards an extreme. We have to establish this. We can't have this tendency, but we have to be prepared for the blitzing when we go against Todd Bowles, which they did amazing against the blitz. Then Todd Bowles stops blitzing in the second half, and they completely sputter out. Their second half offense is 32nd in everything.
Wow.
So they get into the locker room and they either say, if they were pretty successful in the first half, they say, let's just keep doing what we're going to do. And if they weren't, I'm sure the players go, it's AJ and Hurts, and they're like, all right, it's just going to be us today. It doesn't, so they don't, they need more contingency plans. You can't just go into a game and be like, think you're going to draw up some master game plan in 9 minutes during halftime. You have to say, if they do this, this is what we're going to do. But if they do this, which maybe we don't expect, maybe they come into the Vikings and they say, Flores is going to blitz us 60% of the time. But if he doesn't, what are you going to do? Because I actually think they're going to play a ton of cover 2 with 4-man rush, because they know that the Eagles offensive line is vulnerable. Potentially, you get Cashman in there. That's going to be tough to pass against. Remember, the Eagles are one of the worst passing offenses against cover 2 over the last 3 years. The Vikings are by far the best cover 2 defense. So if I'm Flores, I'm like, oh, perfect. We'll just put a bunch of guys up on the line. We'll rotate into various versions of cover 2, Tampa 2, and we're going to confuse the O-line. We're going to use stunts, and we're going to make Brett Toth's head spin, and we'll be fine with a 4-man rush, and we're probably going to trick Hurts a few times.
I can definitely see that being a major part of their strategy. And we've talked a lot about how Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen have not really made maybe the impact that we thought. I think Hargrave was good against the Browns, but a lot of that has been limited numbers of dropbacks from running teams or just the game script and the way that it's played out. Other teams have been leading. Atlanta's leading the entire game. Why would they throw if they've got Bijan Robinson and they're just winning? But I think this is an opportunity for them with the matchup of the interior of the Eagles offensive line versus Allen and Hargrave, who there was some really creative stuff that they did against the Browns with those two guys, lining them up very close to each other, having them run a stunt. And you saw the Browns offensive line kind of be like, wait, what is happening here with these two on the same side of the line, but very close to each other? So I think that they're going to get creative with some of the rushes there. And I agree with you that I think that the word on Jalen Hurts is probably make him sort it out, like make him sort out the different coverages, because as you know, the Vikings don't just show you the coverage. They're not like, oh, see, pre-snap, we're running man, we're running zone. It'll be, hey, this looks like it's going to be cover four, and then all of a sudden it's something else, and sometimes it's something else on both sides of the field. So it's a very creative defense that makes the quarterback think through what he's seeing, which is why Jared Goff is fine, which is why we've seen a number of, Justin Herbert succeed against him, a number of quarterbacks. I don't know that that's Hurts. And I've been a big Jalen Hurts guy the entire time. I wanted the Vikings to draft him in 2020, but there are limitations in some ways. He's not the tallest guy. I don't think he's like Justin Herbert, who stands there and looks over the offensive line. So I think this will be really interesting, because it might just come down to, can they hit on those big plays that you talked about? Because if they do, the wide receivers are as good as it gets in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Hurts, whether it's how he's coached or just how he likes to operate, he likes to see a guy open before
Yeah.
he pulls the trigger.
Yep.
And the way the Vikings play defense, you have to throw with anticipation into windows that shrink really fast.
Yep.
And that's just not something that he does. So either he's going to have to make a concerted effort to make some of those throws coming into this game, or you have the opportunity, like you mentioned, to just take deep shots. And in my opinion, if you want to do that, the way they structure a lot of their defenses, you want to do it on early downs, because if you get into, third and longs, they put that huge cap over the entire. Sometimes they play 5 deep. I'm watching. So, and then they'll like rotate one guy down into the middle to take away crossers or something like this. So you can't get into those situations and be like, all right, now we're going to bomb it out. That won't work at all. But if you have some early situations where maybe you think you can anticipate cover two, because as I'm watching their defense and I'm looking at passing snaps, again, shotgun, they're in cover two like almost half the time.
Yep.
Like, it's unbelievable. Some version of it, right? And I've seen on tape at least like 6 or 7 different versions of it. And one thing I'll note there is it quickly morphs into a quasi man coverage, because they're rarely playing spot drop. Their guys attach their routes really aggressively.
Yep.
So they'll be in cover two, and maybe you're the hook curl guy, and then there's a vertical, boom. Well, that he just attaches that guy for the rest of the play. So maybe there's opportunities where you run guys out in the match zone and then you replace them. If you want to get deep, I think you have to run at the safety's toes. I think you have to run like deep stop concepts, because sometimes the safeties, they'll cede ground, and then there's an opportunity to kind of hit it. You have to throw it on time, probably like a 15 to 18 yard stop route, or a double post. A lot of the structures that they run, I think, are vulnerable to a double post, but this is a long developing route.
Right.
So if you keep like 6 or 7 men into protection, there's a chance that the like weak side defenders are going to be able to recover, because there's only 3 guys out in a route, for example. But if you can block up 4 and then you have 5 out in a route, then you have a chance to attack it. And I think the Vikings defense would not be nearly as successful if they didn't have a good rush. I think it's highly predicated upon that. But the one other thing I wrote on Twitter in my film study was that there are ways to attack and beat the defense, but Flores kind of depends on 2 things. Either one, the way you beat us is a difficult play, like a honey hole shot against cover 2 up the sidelines before the safeties can get there. Or you're not going to run enough running back screens and Texas routes and quarterback scrambles throughout the entire game to continually make us pay. Yep. Most teams go into a game and they're like, oh, we'll sprinkle one of each of those in. Well, you might need to run those 3-4 times a piece if you want to have success. But Flores knows teams don't run pro-style offenses like that. So one of the things in the regular season in the NFL is if you run unorthodox schemes like the Commanders offense, like the Vikings defense, and you have a couple days, 3 days of preparation, really, it's like good luck because you're
Right.
going to have to do a bunch of installs to attack this that aren't typically part of traditional offenses.
Right. And you talk about like sticking with something and Flores forcing you to do it. I think that's why Detroit has had so much success because, well, not only do they run the ball well, but they also will just run crossing routes and hit them over and over and over again. They have no problem with running 40 plays to get down the field. I mean, they will have a 10-minute drive. They'll do that to you, but a lot of teams start to get a little antsy. And that's where, all right, we're going to push the ball a little bit down the field. Then the pressure comes, then the blitzes happen. And even though they are vulnerable deep against the safeties with less speed there than they've had in the past, it's like by the time you get out to the safety, your quarterback is not standing there feeling really good in the pocket. And that's the entire concept. And it is fascinating because like you always have to kind of give up one thing to do something else on defense just in general. And his choice is to be super aggressive. And if you hit some of those plays, then you hit some of those plays, but we're also going to get a sack, a takeaway, that kind of thing. Let's just go over to the other side on the defensive side where there's a lot of guys banged up and the secondary hasn't been the same. They lost Milton Williams, obviously, in the offseason. I think that's been a tough player to replace. How do you view a Eagles defense that has been much more flawed than it was last year versus a Vikings offense that is very, very likely to have Carson Wentz in there? The main idea for Wentz has just been get the ball out as fast as possible, get quick completions, get it to Addison, get it to Jefferson, and then eventually Jefferson will do something deep down the field that will be awesome. But that's kind of been how it's gone. And the Vikings run game has been, improved, but I can't say it's been elite. How do you weigh that matchup versus where Philly has been much more vulnerable than last year?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the Super Bowl kind of set into motion a fake narrative that the Eagles had some kind of dominant pass rush that carried them throughout the season. And really, it was more the coverage. The pass rush was pretty good, but they had a few pop games. And I think that's where that kind
Mhm.
of narrative kind of ran wild. But one thing that should be noted is the Eagles were really never tested on the ground last year. There was a few times they were like you people remember Atlanta early in the season, and they ran wild and they lost that game. Um, the Packers had success running against them. A lot of other teams, because they got behind, or because they were teams that didn't have vaunted rushing attacks, or they had offensive coordinators that loved to pass, they weren't tested. But the vulnerabilities were still potentially there, especially out on the edge. Um, I think a lot of times when you run light boxes, teams are like, oh, well, now we can run between the tackles. But the Eagles, they had Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter soaking up double teams so
Mhm.
that N'Kobe Dean and Zach Bond could make run throughs constantly and make tackles at the line or behind the line. And they were able to survive that way. But the few times they got tested with like outside zone, quick tosses, they got beat there. Um, and then coming into this year, they're facing better offenses. Like, I mean, if you look at the strength of schedule, it's a 180 from last
Mhm.
year, and that's part of it. Teams have started to not shy away from the run quite as much. Even Denver, when they're down multiple scores, ran a bunch in the second half with high success. So let's look at the whys. Their edges, whether it's pass rush or run defense, they're non-existent. And now potentially the best guy, Zadarius Smith, retired.
Yeah.
So the edges, they're not doing anything. Cooper DeJean, he's responsible for a lot of fills on the outside, and he's getting sealed off by skill position players, tight ends, and good blocking wide receivers. So like remember, I mean, people forget he's still like in his 25th game of his career. Yeah, he played amazing, but if you expect him to just block destruct every single time and make tackles for loss on the outside, you're asking for too much.
Mhm.
And then you have corners who are struggling mightily to tackle, and even Andrew Makuba, who's made some nice run stops. If any blockers get his hands on him, he's washed out of the play. So that's a big reason the run defense has struggled. Obviously, going from Darius Slay to either Dory Jackson, Keely Ringo, or Jacorian Bennett, that's a huge downgrade. And really, the big deal there is
I see you.
you can essentially leave Slay and Mitchell on an island, and then you can have the rest of the coverage flood route concepts
Got
for
to
the
be
other eligible
killing
receivers,
KOC.
and you're winning the numbers game that way.
Every
But when you need to
quarterback,
dedicate extra
every.
resources to help your cornerback too, well, now you don't have as much there. So
Mhm.
then you see guys like the best players on the defense, like Bond and DeJean. Yes, they're good, but they can't make the same impact that they were able to make last year because now they're like, oh crap, I better take this guy away. I can't like freelance and read the quarterback's eyes and be like a bonus dropper. I'm integral to the coverage.
Mhm.
And now you lose the ability to like generate turnovers, stop quarterback scrambles, and so on and so forth. So it, just like the offense, it's a domino effect. They've resorted to trying to blitz more. So when you're blitzing Jahad Campbell or Zach Bond, now you're taking potentially a good to great coverage player out of there.
Right.
And if you replace them, you're replacing them with an edge who just pretty much stands there with their feet in cement. So I wouldn't say, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a huge talent deficit, as opposed to they're playing better opponents. Um, Teams have started, not shying away from the run, and then you're not having your stars kind of impacting the game as much. The last thing I'll say on this is Jalen Carter last year, probably 4 or 5 snaps a game, was wrecking the play completely.
Yeah.
That number has gone down, but more so than that, on the plays where he was just out there, because he's out there 90% of the time, and he's trying to be like Chris Jones, where they level up for the big high leverage downs. The rest of the downs, they're kind of coasting. Those downs early in the season, it wasn't like he was just out there. He was the worst player on the field
Mm.
by far. Like he was hardly even moving at all. And like he had his injury to his shoulder and he was out of condition. And then now he had the heel injury. So now you don't have to recruit as many resources to stop Jalen Carter. And now you can help out on the edge, but they don't even need to do that because there's no one out there threatening. So you have no pass rush. And then you have, a rookie corner, a bad cornerback too, and DeJean and Bond trying to patch all those holes, and they can't do it.
I think everything you just said there is why defense is so fragile. And when we're trying to look at the beginning of the season, well, how good's this team going to be or how good's that team going to be? We don't really know. When it comes to defenses, I think they're so much up and down. It's not like a quarterback can drive you through like it can happen on the offense. And I felt that way for the Vikings defense to some extent because that Cincinnati game where they went berserk and had 2 touchdowns from Isaiah Rodgers, it kind of jacked up some of those expected point added numbers. I think they're still really good, but the opposing quarterback schedule for the Vikings so far has been not much. And so it's looked a little bit better on paper than it actually is. And I think what you're talking about is the same sort of thing where it's like the weaknesses for defensive tackle for the Vikings in the run defense cause them to try to patch up that hole, which opens up other things. The same thing seems to be happening here. I noticed that Carter didn't look the same. And I was wondering, like, is he battling through something? And I know he's on the injury report, but it's clear that the injuries have impacted him. And that's where it all starts for them. That's the terror monster that everybody gets messed up by. I mean, the Vikings have for years faced Akeem Hicks, Kenny Clark in his prime. If that guy wins every rep, I mean, it's really hard to run your offense the way you want to run it. So his status for this game and how he performs is going to be a huge deal. And I wonder about trying to blitz Carson Wentz, because Wentz has been doing a great job of getting rid of the ball, but at the same time, he has this tendency to think that he's 24-year-old Carson Wentz and try to scramble, try to make a play on the run. You're like, Carson, bro, that's not you. You might need to just dirt that ball. And you saw Pittsburgh throw a lot of different looks, tons of different blitz packages and simulated pressures and stuff that was really hard for him to deal with. So I'm curious if Vic Fangio in this game sort of kitchen sinks it, where he throws a lot of different stuff at them that maybe he wouldn't normally. Let me give you the line on this game, Eric. It's a 2.5-point favorite on FanDuel for the Philadelphia Eagles. The over-under is 43.5 points. Are you feeling that the Eagles will come into US Bank Stadium, get a win and cover? And how you feeling about that over under 43.5?
I actually predicted 17-13 Vikings.
Okay.
So I don't see a pathway to a lot of points unless they are defensive points. If we start to see, like, turnovers deep in their own territory that turn into points, maybe some special team shenanigans, yeah, maybe there will be some short field scores and then you get to that total. But if there's not, I could just see constant, 3 and outs, 6 and outs. And so no, I don't expect it to be an offensive fireworks at all. I think part of that line is that Vegas thinks Wentz is really bad. Because if they had, let's call it, an average quarterback, I think the Vikings would be favored in this game. And I do think Wentz is a guy, especially if, Carter is 70% of himself. Wentz is the guy, then they have a backup center in from all accounts. Is that true?
Yes, it's going to be more likely than not Blake Brandel, because Ryan Kelly is on IR.
Yeah. So I think they're thinking, and obviously this is all steeped in the knowledge that the line isn't what Vegas is thinking, but how the public perceives the line, and so on and so forth. But I think what the public perception is that the pressure is going to sink Wentz and he's going to turn over the ball a couple times, and the Eagles, they can't be this bad running and passing the ball. And so they're going to have a little bit of regression to the mean, and they're going to squeak out a small victory. And all of those are within the realm of possibility. But if O'Connell is smart, first off, he'll try to get the ground game established early. And it seems like every single game, they'll run those quick outside tosses initially. And then as they get into like second and third quarter, they'll motion across and then they'll run it inside. I think they would have decent success doing that. I think, you see bouts of arm tackling from the Eagles. That doesn't work against Jordan Mason.
No, it does not.
They'll have success there. If they constantly run those little like hitch routes and stick routes to Hawkinson, they get Jefferson in motion, working in stacks and bunches, getting free releases. I think they'll have success there. If the Eagles are able to flood the first read for Wentz, and then he has to either scramble or work to a secondary or tertiary guy, that's where the issues are going to pop up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to happen. I think I can just say, if these scenarios do happen, here's what I think the likely outcome is. But yeah, overall, I think both offenses are going to struggle mightily. And that over-under might be more based off, defensive positioning, field position stuff.
That makes complete sense, which means it'll be 38-35, and both the offenses will go crazy, because you never know what's going to happen when the Eagles and the Vikings get together. It'll be a very interesting schematic watch between these two teams. A lot of talent on the field, and I think both fan bases feeling like, shouldn't it be a little bit better? So this, whoever comes out of this one's going to feel way different about themselves after this game. Goes by Eagles Eric. NFL Oasis is a very interesting site that you created, but also the Eagles Edge podcast. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know how many Vikings fans will go listen to the Eagles Edge podcast because they hate the Eagles, but you did an awesome job of breaking this down. Great to have you on the show for the very first time. Really appreciate it, man. Great stuff.
Absolutely. Happy to come back if we do match up in the playoffs. I actually subscribe to a couple of like Vikings outlets. It's a team I take interest in. So really happy to come on and collaborate in the future.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for doing it. Eagles Eric there. Great with the breakdown. Really, really good and detailed analysis. You could tell he watched a ton of Vikings film there before doing that appearance. So I really appreciate him. And Eric X's and O's, I believe, is his Twitter handle. So make sure you go and check that out. So let us go to our next guest here. We can continue the conversation as well, which is my good pal, Manny Hill. Give me 1 second to get Manny into the mix. And let me give you that FanDuel question of the day real quick as well, which is Carson Wentz's over-under on FanDuel is 31.5. 231.5 yards, and Jalen Hurts is 203.5. Which of those quarterbacks needs to hit the over more in order to win that this contest on Sunday? And Manny Hill, welcome as always on Thursday night at 7:30. How about that FanDuel question? Which one of these quarterbacks needs to perform at a higher level, or say it this way, be leaned upon more for the passing game in order to win on Sunday?
Well, it's interesting because the Eagles, I mean, they got to the Super Bowl last year and won it without Jalen Hurts having to put up a lot of really big numbers, right? I mean, there was talk that the passing game really last year wasn't good at all, and they were leaning so much on Saquon Barkley having a magical season to kind of carry them to that. But this year, Saquon hasn't been nearly as effective in the running game, and the Eagles' offense has kind of suffered because of it. And if that's going to continue, because we see running backs kind of wear down typically after they have a big 2,000-yard season, I kind of think it's going to take Jalen Hurts to kind of step things up in the passing game a little bit more and be a little bit more prolific in that way. And he's got the weapons to be able to do it. He's got two of the best wide receivers in the NFL, got a pretty good tight end, maybe some questions on the offensive line a little bit with protection. But I think with him having those weapons and him being a threat to run himself, I think that should be able to open things up for him to be more successful in the passing game. We just haven't really seen it. So I think he's the one that needs to really have a bigger day passing the ball.
Yeah, it's really weird to say that I think the Vikings should have more success on the ground against the Eagles than the Eagles against the Vikings, not because the Vikings are good at stopping the run. We know they're not. It's really because the Eagles' run game has just been incompetent so far. And it just kind of shows you how much of a difference, well, two things make. I mean, when you go over 2,000 yards and win the Super Bowl, you are dead after, I think, with your body. I don't think you can recover in a year where you're going to have the same explosiveness, and we have not seen it from Saquon Barkley. But I also think just how much Mekhi Becton mattered to them. I mean, you're talking about a former top draft pick who's 6 foot, I don't know, 8, 340 pounds, moves super, super well for that position, was not the best pass blocker because I think DTs could get underneath him a little bit, but was an unbelievable run blocker as a guard. And he was there for them the entire season. You lose him. Landon Dickerson's playing hurt. It's just a totally different story from what it was last year with their offensive line. It's also hard to just break 80-yard runs all the time. He was doing that left and right every game, and it was not going to be repeated. So if their run game remains even similar to what it's been the last couple of games, and the Vikings, I think, have been close with Jordan Mason the last few weeks and had some success still. They were great in the Cincinnati game. This is a team lacking their edge rushers. Jalen Carter has not been the same. Talked about that earlier today, but it just with his injuries has not been the same. And I think the Vikings have a better chance to lean on their run game than have to have Carson Wentz throw all day long.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if you're the Vikings and if you're in a situation where you need Carson Wentz to throw for 350, 360 yards, like they kind of did against Pittsburgh, I think it's going to be a bad day because that's just not that's just not who Carson Wentz is as a quarterback anymore. I think he's a very serviceable backup. He's been able to win a couple of games and play well enough for them to win. But I think for the Vikings, it's going to be kind of establishing that running game with Jordan Mason. They've got the guys up front that should be able to do it at least with some effectiveness and take some pressure off of Carson Wentz so he doesn't feel like he has to carry this team. And I think that's a formula for success against Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So what I want to do, Manny's play a little talk me into, because it's just been a little bit on the downer side here the last couple of a while. So since JJ McCarthy really left Chicago, it hasn't been the best vibes in the Purple Insider stratosphere here with this team. So I want to play a little talk me into, which the game is played very simply. We give each other things that maybe you don't even necessarily believe, but you have to talk the other person into it regardless. So I want to go in the direction about the quarterback play to kind of get your feeling on it, but also make you talk me into this. Talk me and the rest of the people listening into JJ McCarthy comes back at some point this season and is also playing in a playoff game. So talk me into that scenario, how it could happen, and what would have to go down for McCarthy to come back and play in a playoff game.
Well, certainly we know based off of kind of what Kevin O'Connell has talked about is he's going to need to be healthy. He's going to need to get back to 100% and get out there and just play. And I think if he can get out there and play, and if the pieces around him can be healthy enough, this team has enough talent to get to the playoffs, win some games, to set themselves up for a playoff spot. And depending on the matchup that they have, maybe win a playoff game or two. I think the biggest thing is getting to the playoffs first, finding a way to get there and getting that kind of experience for JJ McCarthy. But it's going to come down to him being healthy. And I think if he is healthy and he's getting the reps in practice, something he hasn't been able to consistently get really since he's been here, I think we're going to see him get better and better and better as the season goes along with the more experience that he gets, the more reps that he gets. And there's going to be certain opportunities, I think, late in the season where he's going to have some matchups against some pretty poor defenses where he will have a chance to have some success against. And I think that'll be able to build his confidence too. So I think if he can just get back and healthy, I think there's a strong possibility that this team could get to the playoffs with him leading the way.
When do you think, so I've said this probably, I don't know how many times about his return, that there's no good and perfect time to just drop him back in. It's the NFL. The season's too crazy. You're never going to have everybody 100% healthy and play the worst team in the league, or, then just say, oh, JJ, go beat this team, treat it like a preseason game, and then get back out there and start playing against the good teams. But what do you think the ideal matchup or ideal timing would be for him to return? Let's just not even consider like how soon it needs to be or how much practice or anything like that. Just if you're looking at the schedule, what game would you say, hey, this one would be the best one for him to return?
I'm thinking November 9th against Baltimore at home. Seems a little ways away. It's 3 games before that, but I think with the way Baltimore is playing right now, I want to see JJ McCarthy, if he's going to get out there, I want to see him be able to have some success. And I think with that Ravens defense being as bad as it's been, we don't know the health of Lamar Jackson. That's going to be a big, talking point, I think, in the weeks to come before that. But that matchup against that defense and it being at home too, I think it's an opportunity for him to go out, have some success, and be able to build off of it and have some confidence. And then you got the Bears at home right after that too. So you can kind of, in a way, get him back from this injury and kind of ramp him up for some tougher challenges after that, which would be at Green Bay, at Seattle. Maybe you could talk about at Detroit, the week before. But I'm looking at, giving him a chance to have some early success as soon as he comes out and plays. And that seems to me to be the Baltimore Ravens game on November 9th.
I think you have nailed this answer, Mr. Hill, because if you look, okay, so the next two games, it just is not going to happen this week because of health. And then there's no way to practice enough before you're going to face the Chargers. So those games are out. Now it would seem, all right, okay, go to Detroit. Last year at Detroit, we saw Sam Darnold struggle there. I think Ford Field has become one of the more difficult places to play. And also, you probably need to win some kind of shootout against them. They've solved Brian Flores many times before. That doesn't mean they'll do it this time, but it's still the same quarterback, still a lot of the same weapons, and that offense has been performing at a pretty high level for Detroit. That might be a difficult environment to do it. He will get extra practice time, but that practice time, he can get it locked in, all set, ready to go, then come back home, have his home environment, and not just play a bad defense in Baltimore, but play another bad defense the week after against the Chicago Bears. Green Bay would be difficult November 23rd. Seattle is difficult on the road November 30th. But then you get the Commanders and the Cowboys. I mean, out of those 6 games, can you win 3 of them, 4 of them with JJ McCarthy and stay in the race? You could definitely beat the Ravens. You could beat the Bears, build up his confidence to go to Lambeau for the first time, to go to Seattle for the first time, and then facing the Commanders, who I think are still a really good team, and they should have won the other night, but their defense is not impossible to face, and the Cowboys' defense is the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So, I mean, it's ironic that Carolina, who set the record for yards allowed last year, put up all those yards against Detroit, against Chicago. Against Dallas. Who might break the same record this year with the number of yards that they've been giving up. So that I think that 6-game section would be ideal for McCarthy to come back. You'd like to have it to be against the Lions, but it feels like that might be even still a little soon if he's not really practicing in full this week. There's pretty much no practice at all next week. So he's going to have a week of really full potential practice if his ankle's at 100%. Give me 2 weeks and then play against a team that's pretty much down bad right now in Baltimore. What would you like me to talk you into, Manny?
Talk me into how, because we just haven't seen it enough yet. Talk me into how the Vikings, the rest of this season, can turn TJ Hawkinson back into a legitimate threat and a legitimate weapon in this offense, because we just haven't seen it. And the first couple of weeks, we could kind of say, oh, well, the offensive line was banged up, and so they were keeping him in for blocking purposes. But, you've got Darisaw now back. Obviously, we know O'Neal is banged up a little bit, but you've got your offensive line is getting healthier. And at some point, you've got to get TJ Hawkinson more into the mode of why you traded for him a couple of years ago to begin with. So how are the Vikings going to be able to do that?
Right. So these last 3 games with Carson Wentz at quarterback, 5 catches, 4 catches, 6 catches. It's not quite where he was in 2023, where he was more along the lines of 10, 12, 14 targets in a game, and they were leaning heavily on him with even Kirk Cousins in 2022 was leaning heavily on TJ Hawkinson as they went down the stretch there. So it's not quite to that level, but I think it has a lot to do with whether it's Wentz or it's JJ McCarthy, just understanding that he's kind of always there. Yes, the chip blocking, but I think that's a little overrated. Like, you design that for him to get out into the flat, get out into the middle. It does change things from him lining up in the slot. But when I look at his slot percentage this year versus previous years, it's actually a little bit higher of him playing in the slot than it was last year. So his inline percentage this year is 44.8. Last year it was 56. So he's actually playing less in line this year as the traditional tight end position than he even was last year, right around the same ballpark of about 50% of the snaps. So I don't think that that's been the sole reason why he hasn't been involved. I honestly think it's because that he's so often the check down option that, Wentz is just trying to get the ball to his first read a lot of times. And you see when his first read is presented to him, it's like drop back, throw the ball, bang, it's there. That's why they liked how he's played, is because
Right.
when you could set it up for him, it's there. I think where he's had some struggle and did well at the end of the game against the Browns, but some struggle has been when he has to pick things apart with the defense. Cleveland really showed him a lot at the line of scrimmage. When I reviewed the tape, there wasn't a ton of, oh, that's what coverage they played out of that. Look, it was a lot of, hey, they're actually going to play some man here against Justin Jefferson like idiots, and he's going to go roast Denzel Ward and win the game there. And the same with Jordan Addison, one-on-one. Okay, that's fine with him. He's going to go up and get it and score a touchdown. You're not going to see that as much from Fangio and some of these defenses that are coming up. The Chargers love to throw a lot of different looks, a lot of different blitzes. That's where he has to get through it and understand, get through those reads quick and understand where Hockenson is. And then when McCarthy comes back, he is your best friend, bro. And he was not your best friend in the first couple of games, but he certainly can be. He can be, even the Josh Dobbs game, which I think a lot of people have tried to wash out of their minds because maybe sort of in a way could have possibly cost them Drake May. But, the Josh Dobbs game, what is he doing in that game? A lot of times he's just throwing it to TJ Hockenson because he's going to be there underneath. Unfortunately, with the tight end position, so much of it has to do with, for 95% of the league's tight ends, just what your quarterback is seeing and whether he's giving you the football or not, and a lot less to do with, are you actually getting open or are you actually playing the right way? Which is probably an argument against, it was my argument against the Bears drafting Colston Loveland, and it's probably an argument against signing the contract that they did for Hockenson. Now, you could do it with the rookie quarterback contract, overpay. But if they were in a Kirk Cousins world and they had to really, really hone in on positional value, I would have said it's probably not worth that for most tight ends. Even if I respect the heck out of Hockenson and think he's a great player, they're just dependent on if receivers are drawing the defense, if the quarterback is getting to checkdowns and finding them, because he's not the centerpiece of the offense. And also, one more thing, if you look around the league this year, I think you're going to find a lot of guys with less catches than you'd expect because there's not as many plays being run. When you get the ball at the 30 to 35 and kickers are kicking 60 to 65 yard field goals, teams are kind of playing for the field goal when they get in the other side of the field. And this was brought up to me on our fantasy show today by Mike Shope, that the league is at its lowest number of plays per game in a really, really long time. So I think that there's a lot of guys we're going to look at and go like, oh man, he used to get 8-9 catches. Now he's getting 5-6. But the team in the first two games, I don't even think they reached 100 plays in the first two games. So they also have to stay on the field. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing with Hockenson. It's not necessarily how he's playing, it's how often, it's the other circumstances around, including how often you're getting long drives.
All right. Yeah. I love that. That's a great breakdown. Okay.
Did I talk you into it? Did that work?
Yeah, you actually did. Yes, you did. I think, well, and that's kind of been the thing too, right? Is that sometimes we see this offense, they'll have a couple of 3 and outs in a row and they're just not able to really like sustain a long drive in that, so they can have an impact on it too. All right, here's something else for you. These 2 defensive tackles that they signed in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a little underwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Talk me into it getting better for them. What needs to happen for Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen to just be more productive? We know there's shortcomings in the run game. It's just, I mean, we knew going into the season that the run defense wasn't going to be great for them, but they were brought in to be just absolute menaces from a pass rushing standpoint. Seen it at times, but not really consistently. Talk me into how it's going to get better for both of these guys as we progress through the season. Okay,
this is going to be a funny answer. Pass attempts against is how it's going to happen, because right now the Minnesota Vikings have faced 138 pass attempts against, which is the second lowest in the entire NFL. It's kind of hard to rack up pressures and rack up sacks when the other team isn't throwing. Right. Think about this. The Arizona Cardinals have been on the field for 237 attempts. So that is 100 more attempts against the Arizona Cardinals than against the Minnesota Vikings. And again, very hard for those guys. They were brought here to rush the passer. They were really brought here to play from ahead. That's truly what they were brought here for, because last year, think about it, the Vikings would get a lead and they would often give up some of that lead, and then things would get more hairy than they needed to be, because you don't really want to be blitzing like a madman with the lead, because then you're giving up explosive plays. So you're rushing four. But when your four included Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips, you're not getting to the quarterback with four. That means Jordan Love in 2 different games had a lot of time to throw and was completing passes downfield and coming back and almost pulling off upsets, where the idea was, we'll get ahead. We've got Jordan Mason to run out the clock on the offensive side, have long drives, put a ton of pressure on the opposing team if you're up 10 points. And here comes Allen and here comes Hargrave, and these guys are going to be a nightmare when combined with Van Ginkel or Turner and Jonathan Grenard as a 4-man rush. 138 passes. How many of those have even come with the Vikings having the lead? I mean, it can't be very many, because Chicago at the end of the game, and where did Hargrave get his biggest pressures? Chicago at the end of the game. And Allen, in that game where Chicago threw a ton, those guys were beasts. I think they combined for like 11 pressures in that game, which I haven't seen Vikings defensive tackles do in a really super long time, if ever, maybe since Linval and Tom Johnson, but I mean, usually not. They need to be in the right position, because if you are behind in the game and the other team is handing off the ball to Bijan Robinson time and time again, that they're just not built for that. That's just not what they're here for. So the logic was, you're probably going to play from ahead and then you're going to get sacks and rush four. It just hasn't worked out that way. Like, so many of the Vikings statistics and shortcomings have a lot to do with just the offense isn't on the field as much and they haven't scored a ton of points. Everything is different when that happens.
So basically, it's kind of something that I think we've hinted at a few times, where the offense just needs to get off to a good start. Go down, take that first drive, go down, get a touchdown.
Yes.
If you can get the other team to go 3 and out after that, go down, score another touchdown, or go down and get another field goal. Get a lead early, and then maybe that can kind of change things for those guys and your defense as a whole.
Okay, how about talk me into this, Manny? Two Dog Dad throwing this one out there, and we'll take the chat's talk me intos if they're good. Says, talk me into some of these games having a playoff feeling to them the rest of the way. So some of these games mattering enough to have a playoff feeling. Talk me into that happening.
Talking about on the Viking schedule?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're facing the defending Super Bowl champions this Sunday. I mean, I think they're not the same team, but that still has to have somewhat of a playoff feel to it.
With a winning record, by the way. Does everyone know the Vikings are not 0-5?
Yeah. I think the Chargers game, because it's a Thursday night game and it's the only game that's going to be on, I think that has a chance to have a playoff feel to it. The Chargers are they're banged up on the offensive line, but they're still a pretty good team with a good quarterback and a good head coach, and they've got some studs on the defensive side that can cause some problems. So I think that has it. I think any game, all 4 games against Detroit and Green Bay that are still left, I think have a chance to have a playoff feel to them. I think Seattle's got a chance to have that as well. So I think there's plenty of opportunities for a lot of these games to really have a playoff type of atmosphere, because you're going up against teams that, if you do get to the playoffs, you may have to go against them again. So I think that's going to be huge.
It also, I will admit, it might be Purple Insider wishful thinking, because let me tell you, going to Lambeau on November 23rd, some frost in the air, the leaves are changing, falling off the trees, and you're walking up through the muddy field up to Lambeau Field. If the Vikings are kind of out of it at that point, it's just not the same. So I'm really looking forward to that trip, and it might be JJ McCarthy's first game against the Green Bay Packers still. And I think when you look at the entire NFC, this would be my best argument for this. When you look at the entire NFC, you go, all right, so the Vikings are 3-2, and so is everyone else, or 4-2. Everyone. I mean, let me just pull up the standings to demonstrate. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you folks know the standings, but like maybe you haven't really thought about this. Right now in the National Football Conference, the 49ers, Eagles, Seahawks, Lions, Rams, Falcons, Vikings, Bears, Panthers, and Commanders are all 3-win teams, and Dallas is a 2.5-win team. I mean, right?
I can't believe the Panthers. I can't believe the Panthers are 3-3.
I know.
That team is awful, and they're 3-3. I can't believe it.
It's the NFC, man. And the NFC has, I think, a lot of teams. I mean, when you get to the end of the year, do we even buy fully Tampa Bay? Do we even buy? Oh, I didn't even name the Packers a 3-win team as well. So, because I missed the 3-1-1. So they're a 3-win team as well. All those teams have 3 or 4 wins that are right there with the Vikings in the mix, which means as you go week to week, there's a lot of teams that are of similar strength to the Minnesota Vikings, who, by the way, have had a horrific offense in terms of overall production so far, which I don't expect them to continue to have the rest of the way. I think it will improve no matter who's at quarterback, better blocking with healthier offensive line. Maybe it's Carson Wentz just getting more and more into the offense. Maybe Xavier Scott, picking up more in the run game. Mason picking up more in the run game. Like, I don't think they're going to be right now. They're like the 27th offense in expected points added. Like, I don't think it's going to be like that all season long. So there will be a lot of games that you go into, even if you're bouncing around 500, you're going to go, well, so are they, and so are they, and so are they, and so are they. And it may shake out that it's a bunch of tiebreakers and cockamamie stuff of, you got this home win against that team, but that team didn't beat that team. I think that's what kind of season we're going to have here. And I may have mentioned this to you, Manny, but your favorite football season of all time, I know, is 1994. Mm-hmm. If you look at 94, I believe I added this up the other day, 21 teams in 94, when there was not 32 yet, had 7 wins or more. I think it's going to be like that. And so there will be a lot of games that even if you're a game below 500, you might be 1 game away from taking a big jump in the standings. And there is a good chance that In the Hunt graphic is going to look insane by the time we get to the end of this season. I personally love it that way, Manny.
I do too. And as you were talking, I counted all of the teams in the NFC that are basically essentially 500 or better. 12 of the 16 teams in the NFC are 500, have a 500 record or better. And you mentioned Dallas has 2.5 wins, or 2-3-1. I mean, if they win that game against the Packers, they're 3-3. The Packers are 3-2. And now you've got 13 teams out of the 16 that have a 500 record or better. So, it's nuts, man. And I'm with you. I love it. I think it's really, and I think it, for anything, if you're a Vikings fan, I think it indicates, with all the concerns with the injuries and, how is JJ McCarthy going to look? I think this is a positive sign that they're 3-2 and they're still in this thing. And, depending on how things go with the schedule the rest of the way, they've got a chance to get themselves in a position to make the playoffs. And I think, as we've talked about, that's a successful season. Now, with all the moves they made in the offseason, you're probably thinking win a couple of playoff games, maybe an NFC Championship game run. But I think, all things considered, with what we've kind of seen from the quarterback position so far, if this team can find a way to just get into the playoffs and be competitive in that playoff game and maybe win it, I think I don't know how there can be too many complaints.
All right, let me toss this one out there. A lot of people have talked about KOC's press conference on Wednesday, where he was, it was well described. I think Rob on the comments said curt. He was curt, not to be mistaken with Kirk, but curt as in a little bit shorter in his answers, didn't have a big opening statement. It was noticeable to those in the room. Well, actually, normally he comes out and he has an opening statement. So I was like, looking at my phone. And so, I was not ready for just a like fire away. Like, okay. We're press conference and here we go. Um, so I think that with the it's not hard to interpret. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, and it's been a long season already. And that London trip sounded like it was a real journey for everybody involved to be away from home for that long. And I think that he's also extremely sensitive when it comes to the McCarthy thing. Like, this is his draft pick. This is the kid he's working with. And I don't think he wants anybody to be on the outside telling him how to handle JJ McCarthy, which is understandable. Also, I do think at times that maybe reading the clips is not the best idea for the head coach in such a tense situation. So you could kind of see that a little bit. But I still have gone with, look, this is why you hired him. And he's proven over several years to manage quarterbacks as good as anybody in the entire universe. So talk me into us getting to, say, those final 2 games of the season where they're fighting for playoff spot. And we're saying, wow, KOC handled that perfectly. Like, talk me into that happening.
I think that it is a scenario that plays out where kind of what we talked about, that if McCarthy's going to come back and play, it's that game against Baltimore. And somehow in these next 3 games against Philadelphia, the Chargers, and the Lions, you found a way to win 2 out of those 3 games, whatever combination you want. And that would put you at what, 5-3, right? Going into the Ravens game. And that's the game that JJ McCarthy comes back and plays. And he plays well. They win. Plays well again against Chicago, and they win. And he's built the confidence up a little bit, and he's played really well, maybe in a losing effort against the Packers, and that would put him at like 7-4. I'm kind of picking the schedule before I'm actually supposed to pick the schedule tonight. But I think at that point now it's, like I said before, everything is kind of taken off for JJ McCarthy, and he's really playing well. It's not perfect. There's going to still be some times where, he makes a throw or decision where you're like, JJ, what the hell is that? What are you doing? But overall, the overall performances are good, and they're getting better, and you're seeing the progress and the development that you want. And now you're in a position going into Christmas Day against the Detroit Lions at home, and you're like, all right, this team is 9-6, and they're right in the middle of the playoff spot, right in the middle of the conversation, and they've got an opportunity against probably the 2 best teams in this division to make some noise and get themselves into the playoffs. And with the young quarterback that everybody wants to see grow and develop at the helm for that, I think that's where it's going to be like, wow, okay, yeah, he handled this well. He brought him back at the right time. The team, he's playing well at the right time, and this is headed in the right direction.
I think that's the ideal scenario. Him handling it well, I think, will really come down to 2 things. When he is going to decide for him to come back. And I like pinpointing the Ravens game as the best possible time. Now, if they lose the next 2, then just play him against Detroit. Who cares? But if you go 1-1, give him enough practice time, because I know they're going to have the mini bye, but you don't practice a ton after the Thursday game. It's not like you have 5 more practices. You'll have 1. You'll probably practice on that Monday, and it'll be a light practice leading up to the Detroit game. And that's the only extra practice you actually get. You don't come back and practice on Saturday and Sunday and whatever. You're resting at that point. So if he could get his ankle back to 100% by the time they're going into the Lions game, let him practice that full week at 100%. Then the next week, QB1, unless they're 3-0, then I guess that could possibly change. But making the right choice of when to bring him back, and then when he gets back, that these fundamentals that they've been talking about so much, if they click, if they've been coached into him correctly, if the scheme has been adapted correctly for him to fit a little bit better than maybe it did in those first couple of games, then I think we're going to say, okay, he nailed it. Where it might get muddy is if he doesn't play in a scenario like that. And then I will be sitting here saying, look, they're handling it the right way. If he's not ready, he's not ready. And Vikings fans will be saying, we're getting our pitchforks and taking them to Carson Wentz's apartment wherever he's staying in Minnesota. Like that, I think that that's where it's going to get tricky from the outside perception versus him. But I think it really comes down to him being fully sure that he's 100% healthy to be able to play and ready with the things that he needs, the tools in his toolbox. And then, unfortunately, here, the results are just going to have to speak for themselves. Like behind the scenes, he's going to work super hard with McCarthy, but really, in order to be fully talked into it, we just have to see it. Like, you're doing a good job of it. Hey, if they bring him back at the right time and he's got enough work behind the scenes and he's 100% ready to go, then we're going to say KOC did the right thing. But if he doesn't play well, or even if he's not in there, I'm sure a lot of people will say that KOC is doing the wrong thing. And that's the unforgiving part of being an NFL coach, is no matter what you do, if it doesn't work out on the scoreboard, you did it wrong. So that is life. I want to get to picking the schedule. I have one more thing for you. I want to remind everyone of the FanDuel question of the day. Carson Wentz is over under 231.5 yards on FanDuel and Jalen Hurts 203.5. Which quarterback needs to be leaned upon more and hit the over in order for their team to win this game? That's the FanDuel question of the day. And I also wanted to just soliloquy for a second here about another kerfuffle over PFF grades, which is kind of why I wrote the book about it, which you can get on Amazon. Football is a numbers game. It amazes me how many people and former players will see a single grade that they think is wrong from watching the game on TV and then go on as analysts and scream their brains out that PFF grades don't mean anything, when I don't think they fully realize how much goes into those grades, which is what I wrote about in the book, where you have your initial graders who have been vetted through a process of really competition to see who can grade the most accurately. And then those people grade the game, and it goes through then another layer of former coaches and former players who regrade the game themselves. And if there's differences on certain plays, they get together and they look at it and they decide what the right way to go. And there's been so many scenarios over the years that have played out. It used to be a binder. It's probably a PDF now, a binder this thick, hundreds of pages thick, with all different scenarios and how you grade them. If this happens, then you grade it this way. If this play, on a duo block, here's what you're looking for that would be a grade. Because these grades have been formulated by the National Football League, by feedback from players, from coaches. I interviewed one of the coaches who helped them form their offensive line grades. The guy is a legend, formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals, Paul Alexander. He helped them, work directly with them. Here is how you grade the players. And then he compared his own grades with the Bengals to PFFs and found above 90% accuracy. So I think people think that it's just some guy in his basement taking a guess. It's not. The other thing is, there's only so many schemes in the NFL. The idea that you would be so clueless on what someone's assignment would be that you just should shut the whole company down and not take it seriously is insane. There's outside zone, inside zone, duo. Did you win your block? Did you not win your block? There are very few times, and it does happen, but there are very few times in a game where something happens and you're like, I don't know whose fault that was. And they have to take their best chance at it, looking at through history, how they've graded it, the feedback they've gotten. No one is going to be perfect. But I think the biggest issue is that people will overlook something. Here's a good example. Michael Penix almost threw the game away against the Bills. It knocks off the guy's hands. That is a horrific grade. Like, you deserve a -2. It's a terrible throw. It's a terrible decision. But we forget about it. Michael Penix played a great game. Look at his box score. Or people will look at, Mahomes is the 13th best quarterback. Isn't he the first best? Well, it's not a player ranking. It's the performance that he's had so far this season. I mean, Patrick Mahomes in yards per attempt is like 8th. I mean, he's not playing MVP level football so far. He probably will eventually and rise the rankings. And just there is no stat, none, zero, ever, that just tells you all the answers. And I think in a chat GPT world, that's what everyone's looking for. Let me just type in one thing, give me all the answers, and I don't have to do any, I almost swore. I don't have to do any work. I don't have to do any work. I just want to be lazy. And then when the answers are wrong, I'm mad. What? Why aren't all the answers perfect? Well, interceptions aren't perfect. Carson Wentz threw a pick against Pittsburgh where somebody's hand knocked it into the defender. That's not Carson Wentz's fault, but it goes down as one interception, the same as if he threw it right to the second interception, which was horrific. They're both scored the same way. Should we just shut our brains off and be like, interceptions, tell the whole story? Why do we do that with PFF grades? With PFF grades, and I've used them my entire career to evaluate the football team that I cover, I think there's been nothing that's told the story better. No other stat, no other box score stat compared to what I've heard from coaches, heard from players, and then who they pay, who they keep, who they sign. Let's talk about Grenard, Van Ginkel. Let's talk about Cashman, Isaiah Rodgers, their best signings. Go back and look at those guys' grades. They saw the coaches and the evaluators inside the building, the same things that PFF was looking at. It's usually not rocket science, folks. And if somebody is playing like Drew Samia or Dakota Dozier, if PFF was brain dead, those guys would actually be re-signed, wouldn't they? Not released, not benched, not right. So I do think that from game to game, it's really hard to understand the system based on 1 to 100 because Bijan Robinson fumbles early in the game. So he doesn't get the greatest grade, even though he had an amazing game because fumbles get destroyed on this system. Holding penalty for Blake Brandel crushed his grade. Brandel played really good against great competition. It doesn't factor for competition. You have to use your noggin, my friends. We got to use it. You got to use the context, the other things you know. You have to read what your coach is saying or listen to what your local podcaster is saying as part of the analysis. Blake Brandel did a great job considering the circumstances. If he played like that for an entire season, we would say what? Well, he's a backup. And that he is a backup, right? And hey, by the way, Blake Brandel last year's PFF grade indicated he was a backup. What did they do? They drafted a first-round left guard. I could go through the whole history of this. Christian Darrisaw never made a Pro Bowl, did he? His PFF grade said he was unbelievable. They paid him $35 million a year. So I think that nothing is actually... How about Garrett Bradbury, right? I mean, his grades for years have said underwhelming in pass protection. They replaced him. It just... A lot of these times that these things match up, but nothing is ever going to be perfect. So you have to use all the context you can put together. And if you just lose your mind every time you see a grade, rather than trying to find out and understand why it was that way, then you just, to me, sound like a caveman. And I got nothing for you. But one more thing, I agree with Chris Long, not our friend Chris Long, but the former player, when he said just throwing up those PFF rankings on Sunday Night Football is not great. I agree with him. What they should do is put up a specific stat that highlights that player. Like he's 10th in this, or here's a data point for him. He's got X number of pressures. They should put up something that's more telling, because just saying someone is 23rd out of whatever just doesn't tell much of a story. So I had to get that rant out because it's been out there, and I just need people to read the book to understand. And I want to say one more thing is that if you think, oh, players hate PFF, you are so wrong. You are so wrong, because I have been in the house. I have slept in the house of the owner of PFF who started Pro Football Focus, Neil Hornsby. And you know what he has in his basement? He has signed jerseys from players. Chris Harris was one of them. Mike Iupati was one of them. Signed jerseys that were sent to him saying, thank you for highlighting what I can do when my abilities are almost never shown on TV or in Pro Bowls or something else like that. So if you think that, all former players think it's stupid, you could not be more wrong. And if you think teams don't use it, you might want to read some chapters, because I actually go over how exactly teams do use it. But that would take reading. Not everybody wants to read these days. They just want to watch people yell their faces off on TV that if I disagree with a grade, I must be a genius and they must be stupid. Oh, got it. Okay. Anyway, let me take a break. A little deep breath there. But that's the whole thing on that. That's the whole thing on that. You want to pick the schedule? It's why I wrote the book. It took 2 years to write. Can we read it?
Well, and I think to kind of piggyback off of that, I think a lot of it too, the sort of the discourse or whatever, the people that like to poo-poo PFF grades is when they see a grade that doesn't fit a narrative that they want to run with or stick by, that's what kind of ticks them off too. They just don't like to see something that is proven to be pretty accurate, proven to make a lot of sense, but it doesn't fit the narrative that they love to run with. So, yeah, it's
Do you
unfortunate,
want to
but
know
yeah.
real quick how Kwesi Adafo-Mensah uses PFF grades? He told me. It's in the book, but I'll tell you anyway, so you don't have to buy it and you don't have to actually take some time to read. Here's how he talked about using it. Well, one, he did research using them for the draft, which helped him stand out in the San Francisco front office. Believe it or not, he didn't just show up here. So in the San Francisco front office, run by a former player, John Lynch, that's how Kwesi made a difference there, was studying the grades and data from college football and presenting them with information. Another way that they use it now is as a comparative tool. So let's just say, for example, that your defensive line coach, Marcus Dixon, let's say that he absolutely loves what Harrison Phillips is doing. Oh my gosh, I just think he's amazing. I love it. And you're in the meeting evaluating whether to trade him or not. They're going to look at that grade and compare it. And they're not gonna go, oh well, PFF says this, Marcus, you're an idiot. They're gonna say, all right, so here's what the grading is coming out with. Here's what you're saying. Let's all get together and talk about this more. Let's figure out like what it is that he's doing differently. And Harrison, I think, was a very hard player for them to grade, by the way, properly in Flores' system. I used my brain and talked to Harrison about it and figured it out. But just to make that point, though, like that's how it's done in a lot of front offices. They all, guess what? The Dallas Cowboys have hired some of the best analytics people. The Ravens have some of the best analytics people. I know who they are. Like, they are looking at this data, and in these meetings, this is how it works in the NFL. They get together in these meetings and they talk stuff out. You'd never believe it, right? And they go through decisions that they're going to make. And the general manager has his take, and the player personnel has his take, and the scouts have their take, and the analytics person has a seat at that table. And so when they get to the analytics person, he's going to present his data, and it's going to, a lot of times, include what the PFF grades say. So no team is just going, well, PFF said this, so obviously we're just going to do what they say. It's part of the discussion like any other statistic would be. So if you're just trying to use it for all the answers, well, then you're doing it wrong. If you're saying that it means nothing, you're also doing it incredibly wrong. So, okay, now I'll stop. Let's get to picking the schedule, Manny. So here's what you need to do. Well, I think that here's how we're going to pick this. When we get to Baltimore, JJ's the quarterback. Okay. So the next 3 games, Carson's the quarterback for picking purposes. Then when we get to Baltimore, McCarthy is the quarterback. Okay. So the Vikings are 0-5. No, I'm sorry. They're 3-2 facing off with the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Do they win this football game?
I think they do. I think the Eagles still have a lot of talent, but something just seems really off with them. It's kind of seeming a little bit like it was at the start of last year and kind of how it finished 2 years ago for them. And I think the Vikings being at home, coming off a bye, I think they're going to be fresher, confident, and the Vikings win the game against Philadelphia.
Okay, so to 4-2, and now facing the Los Angeles Chargers on a short week.
Going to be tough. Going to be a short week against a pretty good team, but that team is a little banged up. They've got some issues on the offensive line. And with both their tackles out, I think this is an opportunity for Jonathan Grenard to really feast a little bit. And I think this is a game where they could get out to a good start. And like we talked about with Hargrave and Allen, getting a lead, maybe open up some things for them to be more productive in the from a pass rushing standpoint. think the Vikings find a way to squeak out a win in Los Angeles as well.
Wow. So winning the next 2 games with Carson Wentz, this does make it a little bit on the trickier side. That brings them to 5-2 as they head to Ford Field and Detroit. Presumably, if you win 2 in a row, then Wentz would still be the quarterback. Do they beat the Lions at Ford Field?
No, they do not.
Okay.
This is where I think it could get a little ugly. I think the Lions are playing really well. I know things didn't go well for them in Kansas City, but I think overall they've kind of figured things out a little bit after kind of that really poor performance to start the year against Green Bay. And Ford Field's just a really tough place to play. It's just hard to win there. It's loud. It's kind of become a modern day Metrodome, sort of the way it was for the Vikings in the 90s and the 2000s. And I think the Vikings are going to go in there. I think it's going to be a pretty tough day. I think Carson Wentz is going to struggle. And I think this will then open up the opportunity in the conversation to get JJ McCarthy back in there. And so that will drop the Vikings to 5-3.
Okay, 5-3, then coming back home, assuming that Lamar Jackson will be playing. Also, I will add for that Thursday night game, Joe Alt did start practicing again. That doesn't mean he'll be back by Thursday. That's a short window, but just a note to keep an eye on that it's potentially a chance that he could come back. I don't think he will by then, but we'll see. Okay, so Baltimore, as you said, in this scenario, Wentz has grinded them through a couple wins. He's played okay, but the wheels kind of come off a bit in Detroit. So you're 5-3. It's time for JJ McCarthy again to face off with Lamar Jackson and a beleaguered Baltimore Ravens team.
The chance for JJ to get out and really kind of show what he can be. The really bad Baltimore defense. You get Lamar back. If you're the Ravens, this can make things a little interesting. We know how dynamic and amazing he is. Derrick Henry is still not quite what he was last year, but he's still been pretty productive. I think he's still averaging about 5 yards a carry. And so that's going to be something to kind of watch with the Vikings run defense as well. But I think the Vikings being at home, going up against that struggling Ravens defense, I think they find a way. And win the game.
Okay, so to 6-3 after the win against the sputtering Ravens, and now the emerging Bears, potentially. I haven't really decided what I think of the Bears, Manny, because
I have no idea.
I mean, okay, so you beat the Raiders on a blocked field goal. You beat Washington because they fumble a snap. Should have lost both of those games. And if they're not 3-2 because of those, and instead they are 1-4, we're talking about the Bears as an utter disaster, even though we've seen better from Caleb Williams. Williams still wasn't good the other night overall, and this was another PFF kerfuffle that Williams got a bad grade for that game. But did you watch it? Like, it wasn't a good, most of the yards were yards after catch, schemed wide open throws, and then there was a lot of muddiness from him in that game. He's playing better. Their coach is good. Their weapons are really good. But are they good enough to come to US Bank Stadium and win?
It's going to be interesting to see what the Bears' record is come this game, because if you look at their 4 games before this, home against New Orleans, at Baltimore, who's struggling, at Cincinnati, who's not very good, then they're home against the Giants. The Bears might
3 out of 4?
Might be, 3 out of 4 of those, and that puts them at 6-3
Wow.
going into this game. And then you want to talk about playoff atmospheres. If the Bears and Vikings are both 6-3 going into that game, sign me up for that. That could be fun. I'm going to give the Vikings the edge here because they're at home. If this game were at Soldier Field, like it was in week 1, I would lean Bears, but I think Vikings got that game out of the way already, found a way to win it. And I think being at home here against Chicago, I think will put them over the top.
Can I just say something real quick? The Bengals are leading the Steelers, and Joe Flacco is 11 for 16 with 102 and 2 touchdowns. Joe Flacco might be my favorite player of all time. The fact that
unbelievable.
This guy made an unbelievable amount of money, and he decided, I'm just going to be like a Bronco and a Jet. It was terrible. Like, why aren't you retiring, Joe Flacco? Then he comes back with the Browns randomly. Why aren't you retiring, Joe Flacco? Makes the playoffs, comes back, is bad last year with the Colts. It's just a nightmare. And he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it again. Just gonna keep rolling it out there
Go back to the Browns.
until they wheel my carcass off the field. And now he's beating the Steelers and playing great. That is super funny. They've also somehow run 9 times for 97 yards. What is this league, man? What is this league? Like the Steelers defense looked unbelievable against the Vikings and the Browns, and now it looks horrible against the Bengals, who have no off. I don't know. I don't know football. I can't predict. This is why I don't make a lot of bets, man. Actually, none.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what the heck is going to happen in this league. So anyway, I forgot. Did you say they beat the Bears?
Yes, they beat the Bears and they're 7-3.
7-3. To Lambeau, JJ McCarthy goes in this Manny picks the schedule scenario.
I'm going to put this down as a loss. I think that's just going to be a tough place to play. I think McCarthy has a chance to, if he's playing well against Baltimore and Chicago, he has a chance to go into Green Bay and maybe play kind of well. But I think the Packers, being at home in that environment and that crowd, I mean, sign me up for that game. That game's going to be fun and intriguing, but I think the Packers end up coming out on top.
I think so too. First trip to Lambeau. Anytime you're going to Lambeau and it has even the potential to be cold, it's pretty tough to play down there. And look, they're not a perfect team. They're beatable. We saw Cincinnati mess around and almost beat them last week. Their offense is weird because when you look at the numbers, Jordan Love's had a great season numbers wise, but yet you watch them and you're like, is it like, what's up with this? Yeah. Why isn't this working the way it should? They haven't run the ball the way that we thought. Their defense secondary is questionable, but I agree. Usually it's a split with the Vikings and Packers anyway. To Seattle, another difficult place to play when the Seattle fans are engaged. And I think they will be in this case. So you've got them now at, are we 7-4?
7-4.
7-4. Okay. Out to Seattle.
Yeah. The Seahawks have kind of surprisingly not been able to win very many home games lately for some reason.
Isn't that strange?
It's so weird because that crowd, I mean, that game against the Buccaneers last week was just incredible. It was just awesome. Atmosphere was fantastic. But Baker went in there and made enough plays and the Buccaneers won that game. So I think there's a chance for the Vikings to go in and play well. But I'm going to put this down as a loss for them because I think Sam Darnold is he's just playing great, man. He's just playing. And I'm not going to lie. I'm happy to see it. He's been playing fantastic for them. And I think he's fit in nicely there in that town. They seem to like him there. And so I'm going to give Seattle the win here, but I think it'll be a close, tight, competitive game.
I think so too. And one of the reasons is that, Darnold has a lot of practice banked against Brian Flores, but also the one thing he has is fearlessness. We know that can cut both ways, but he will stand in the pocket and take that hit to throw downfield. And that's what I think has been a difference maker when they played Stafford, when they played Goff versus some younger or less talented quarterbacks. So 7-5. Home against the Commanders December 7th. I just don't even know what to think of the Commanders. They've been without Terry McLaurin. It's clearly impacted their offense a ton. Their defense has been really good at times, also suspect at times. Jaden Daniels, I'm not sure if he's even 100% healthy at this point, coming back. So they're not quite the team that I think any of us really thought they were going to be, but the season is still young. So do they win back at home against the Commanders?
I'll say yes, just because of the question mark of like what the Commanders are going to look like between now and then. I mean, we're still about a month and a half away, and is Jaden Daniels going to be healthy? Is he going to be able to hold up between now and then? That's going to be a huge question mark. And if he's not, even if he's playing and he's still not 100%, that's going to really hamper Washington's ability to compete because it's a pretty significant drop off between him and Marcus Mariota at this point.
Or at least sometimes Mariota's amazing. And then the very next week, you're just like, who the heck was that? So you're going win here then.
Yep. I'm taking the Vikings.
All right. To 8-5, then to the ballpark in Arlington, Jerry Dome. What is it called now? The Texas Rangers used to be the ballpark in Arlington, but I'm sure it's now like.
Yeah. The ballpark in Arlington is like home to the Dallas USFL team or
Oh,
something.
really? So
Yeah,
they
they're
built a
playing,
whole
they're
new
playing,
this.
they're playing football at the old place where the Rangers used to play.
Oh, okay.
But they're in a new stadium now. The
Okay, is
old
Will
stadium
Clark still at first?
Pudge Rodriguez still playing catcher for the
Juan
Rangers.
Gonzalez.
Those are some fun Rangers teams, man.
They were good. Rusty Greer. I'll keep going.
Michael Young. I'm picking the Cowboys here. I'm gonna take the Vikings to win here. That Cowboys defense is just so bad.
Yeah.
And there's no light at the end of that tunnel of fixing it. And their offense, the Cowboys can put up some points, certainly with Dak Prescott. But I'm gonna take the Vikings to go in there and play well and take care of business.
I will keep saying this. The Cowboys are the best watch in football. It's the most fun watch in the NFL. They are not the best team. They're not even a good team. They are entertaining. Jerry's got his wish. They are entertaining as heck. They got CeeDee Lamb coming back. George Pickens is a star. They score 1 million points. They give up 1 million points. They're
not going to flex that game. Well, they won't flex out that game out, will they?
Depends on where they're. No, if it's Cowboys and they're still in the race, then they won't. Probably not. Not unless they're really bad. But I don't think they will be. I think they'll be just like everybody else and be mediocre. So you have the Minnesota Vikings at 9-5 heading into the last 3 games. Yeah. Emmanuel, what did you drink before this appearance? What are we doing here?
0 sugar Canada Dry. That's what I've been drinking tonight. Okay, so 9-5 at the Giants now. I think I'm going to pick this game as a letdown game.
Okay, yeah. Jackson Dart now.
Yeah, the Giants seem to be playing a little better. They're still the Giants. They're still kind of a walking disaster. But Jackson Dart's shown some flashes of like maybe there's something there. I don't know what to think of Daboll as a coach. I just don't know. I mean, his first year looked like he had it figured out, and then it's been a disaster ever since. But I'm going to put this down as a loss in a weird Vikings lose a game late in the season type of way. So I'll take the Giants here.
Okay. It makes sense to have a letdown game mixed in. You got some pretty good wins mixed in. Also, thanks to Tasty Treats for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Okay. So now 9-6. Last 2 games of the year, Christmas Day, home against the Lions, then home against the Packers. And earlier we were asked to talk folks into how they could be in the playoff atmosphere. I mean, if they are 9-6 headed into these games with a chance to go to the playoffs, US Bank Stadium, if it's JJ McCarthy at quarterback, will ignite, even though they can't shoot fire inside the stadium anymore. It drives me crazy. It will explode. The roof will come off in these 2 games. But the question is, that hasn't mattered at all to Jared Goff at US Bank Stadium. He's been like, all right, I don't mind noise. I'll just throw it to wide open guys over the middle of the field and beat the Vikings at US Bank Stadium. Jordan Love's had his good and bad at US Bank Stadium. These 2 games will determine whether this is a successful season or not, I think. Unless McCarthy is really good and they lose on tiebreakers for the playoffs. But 9-6 against the Lions. What happens?
I think this will be I think this is going to be the loudest US Bank Stadium will be all season for this game. But like you said, man, Jared Goff just does not seem to phase him at all. He just comes in and delivers and I go back to when he was with the Rams and they went into the Superdome and won that NFC title game. He didn't have a great game, but then he made some plays late in that game and some throws where you're like, oh, this dude is not rattled by a raucous environment. So I'm going to take Detroit to win this game. I think it's going to be the loudest US Bank Stadium will be all season. It's going to be a rocking game on Netflix. And I'll take Detroit winning a really tight, close, awesome game.
If I'm not mistaken, the broadcast still gets played locally though, right?
I believe it does.
I think that's right. It's only in other markets that you have to have the Netflix, not if you're in Minnesota, but a lot of our listeners are not from Minnesota. So I'm sorry to all of you if you're not a big Netflix person. So I got caught up on that. Win, loss? I
picked the Lions to win the game.
Oh, okay. All right. So 9-7. with one game to go against Jordan Love, Green Bay Packers, Micah Parsons, stars all over the field, the Vikings' biggest rival. What a contest this will be. But will the Vikings win to get to 10 victories in 2025?
I am going to take them to win this game. It's going to
Ooh.
have the similar vibes of the season finale against the Packers in 2012, and Adrian Peterson had his MVP season, and the Vikings needed to win to get into the playoffs. And I think it's going to be, JJ McCarthy having a really good game when they need him to. It just feels like this is a game where the Vikings need to win it to get into the playoffs, and all of the key players show up to play. McCarthy has a good game. Jordan Mason runs the ball well. Justin Jefferson is awesome as always, and the defense makes enough plays and propels the Vikings to victory and propels them into the playoffs.
I'm going to tell you the truth, Manny. I could see this happening. I think it's not unrealistic at all to think that they could survive these next couple games. McCarthy comes back. It starts to click like we've seen from a lot of other young quarterbacks where maybe it was rocky at times. And then maybe there are still along the way some bumps where you lose a game you shouldn't. You have a letdown game. You have a very bad game like you had against Atlanta because you can't kind of pull out of, getting into a rut. But if they were to walk away from this season with double-digit wins and McCarthy taking them down the stretch, it would be a runaway success for this year.
I agree.
And I will say this, that probably, just considering how the information has changed, includes even if they don't win in the playoffs, KOC needs to win in the playoffs. But if you go through all of this with McCarthy, the injury, the absence, the rebuilding of the fundamentals, and then you get to that point still, and you get a huge win against the Green Bay Packers to go to the playoffs, the way you're going to feel about McCarthy would be really, really good in your ability to win with him, which is very important. It's not as good as winning playoff games and going to the NFC Championship and so forth, but it would bode really well for where this franchise was going overall into 2026 and even beyond that, because it would mean he could do it. And that's what you really need to come out with. I still think number one priority should be playoff wins overall. But if you come out of 2025 knowing that he can take you somewhere, that has a lot of value for the future considering his age.
Yeah, and I think you get into the playoffs and you get matched up against, I don't know, you play the 49ers at home because the 49ers won the West, or, maybe Seattle or the Rams or something like that. You get matched up with one of those teams and you just lose because you're on the road, and it's just tough to win playoff games on the road. And McCarthy plays well, and he shows some toughness, and he goes out there and he gives you a chance. You don't get blown out kind of like you did last year in Arizona against the Rams, or I kind of think about the game against the 49ers back in 2019 where they just kind of no-showed after the big win against the Saints. You just kind of knew right away this team ain't going to be able to compete in this game. I think as long as you can avoid something like that, even if you lose, I think you can really feel pretty good about the quarterback. Still going to be some, the winning a playoff game question mark over the head coach. But I think when you think about the young quarterback and the direction that this team is potentially heading in, I think you got to feel pretty good about that.
When I saw Bengals and Steelers on the slate for tonight, I thought, well, I'll be able to concentrate and write my mailbag for purpleinsider.football. Make sure you go sign up to the newsletter. But it's fun right now. 14-10. Cincinnati's got the ball. Rodgers just threw his second interception. I know after he threw his first touchdown, I said to you, is KOC seething right now a little bit with Rodgers, making some throws, but he
did look like the old Aaron Rodgers on the touchdown that he did throw. The problem is he's 41 years old, and can he do that for an entire game? Probably not.
That one, I think that if you're saying, well, they regret not having him, I'm like, I don't know that he's going to play any better than Carson Wentz at the end of the year, but Darnold might be a slightly different story at the end of the season. I guess we'll have to find out where it all goes. So remember to answer that FanDuel question of the day if you are rewatching the show here. Carson Wentz over-under is 231.5 yards on FanDuel. Jalen Hurts 203.5. Which QB needs to hit their over in order to win the game. Manny Hill, we will be back on Monday. Of course, next Thursday, I will be in the state of California, back in a stadium that I have twice gotten very, very lost trying to get in and out of. So we'll try to go 1 for 3 when we're out there. They don't have a lot of signage to help out the old media figure out where we're supposed to go. Some stadiums better than others with that. But wish me luck on that. But I will see you on Monday night with the roundtable with Murph to break it all down and where this goes from here after the game against Philadelphia. So thank you for your time, Manny. And thank you all for listening, watching, and now go view two old men battle it out on Thursday Night Football. So thanks, Manny. Thanks, everybody. And we'll catch you all tomorrow night. We'll have Andrew Kramer doing the hardcore breakdown tomorrow night. So we'll see y'all then. Football.
Football.